Chapter 1029. 100 miles away from Feihong Pass, the Mahist army was marching towards Feihong Pass with a black flag. Mo Xiaoyao rode his horse at the front of the group. His snow-white hair made him look even colder than before. Although he had just wiped out a group of West Hill soldiers, Mo Xiaoyao's brows were still furrowed. Greetings to Prince. A fast horse came from the direction of Feihong Pass and stopped in front of Mo Xiaoyao. He did not even have time to get off the horse and saluted directly on the horse's back. Seeing him rushing over, Mo Xiaoyao's heart sank. He said, "No need to be so courteous. How is Feihong Pass?" The man said in a low voice, "I am incompetent. Princess refuses to leave Feihong Pass." "What did you say?" Mo Xiaoyao's handsome face suddenly became as cold as iron. The anger in his eyes was clear. The man said, "There was a fierce battle at Feihong Pass yesterday. Almost half of the soldiers stationed there were killed. In addition, the 6 Qilin troops that were left at Feihong Pass were almost completely wiped out. Her Highness refused to leave Feihong Pass first." Mo Xiaoyao narrowed his eyes and asked coldly, "What about the little heir?" The man said, "A few days ago, Her Highness sent the little heir back to Glass City." After listening to the Shadow Guard's report, Mo Xiaoyao's face became very serious. After a while, he said sternly, "Black Cloud Cavalry, follow I first. We must reach Feihong Pass before noon today." The Black Cloud Cavalry soldiers following Mo Xiaoyao answered in unison. Mo Xiaoyao told Ling Huai, and he sued to be in charge of the soldiers behind. He then led the 30,000 Black Cloud Cavalry towards Feihong Pass. The conversation did not last long. When Yili returned to the tower, Feng San and the others who were waiting could not help but breathe a sigh of relief. They were actually worried that Lei Jinting would act out of desperation and harm Yili. Yili didn't relax at all when she saw how relaxed everyone was. She didn't understand why Lei Jinting had specifically looked for her to say those words. However, he understood Lei Jinting's determination to break through Feihong Pass and his future plans. Therefore, their true difficulty had yet to come. This time, Lei Jinting did not show any mercy. Hundreds of thousands of Shilling army continued their relentless attacks. The remaining 100,000 Mahist army could not go out of the city to fight and could only defend the city walls. However, the difference in numbers between the two sides was too great. Moreover, the Mahist army soldiers had been fighting hard for days and could be said to be extremely tired. On the other hand, the Shilling army had many soldiers and horses and could take turns to fight, so they were not very tired. Under such circumstances, when it was almost noon, the Mahist army at Feihong Pass was faintly unable to hold on. But even so, it still far exceeded Lei Jinting's plan of breaking through Feihong Pass in 4 hours. Soon, a West Hill soldier climbed up the gate tower of Feihong Pass, followed by a second and a third. Although many of them were cut down by the soldiers guarding the gate, more and more West Hill soldiers climbed up the gate tower. Therefore, the fighting that was originally only under the tower and on the battlements began to shift to the top of the tower. Yili slashed the throat of a West Hill soldier with a knife. Just as she was about to turn around, a knife flashed behind her. Yili quickly raised her hand to block, but was even pulled to the side. The West Hill soldier who was waving the knife with a ferocious face fell to the ground. Han Mingwei stood behind Yili. She was still dressed in snow-white clothes and looked elegant. "Why haven't you left?" Seeing Han Mingwei, Yili frowned slightly and asked. They had the responsibility of guarding the city and had to stay. But Han Mingwei did not have any position in the Mahist army and naturally had no obligations. Also, Han Mingxi had been sent back to Glass City by her in the name of official business. Han Mingwei had even less reason to stay here. Han Mingwei smiled faintly and said, "I want to see how far Wang Fei and the Mahist army can go." Yili smiled helplessly and said, "You see it now? I can't take it." Yili felt helpless and lost. She had persisted for so many days, but in the end, this was the result. More importantly, their failure did not just mean failure, but also the price of failure. Once Lei Jinting led his troops into the pass, the consequences would be unimaginable. Does Wang Fei regret? Han Mingyue asked curiously. Yili shook her head and said, I only do what I should do. Also, no matter what the result is, what has happened cannot be changed. What is the use of regret? Looking at her calm and composed appearance, Han Mingyue suddenly felt her emotions calm down a lot. She smiled and said, The reason I stayed is because I feel that maybe a miracle will happen. I hope so. Yili smiled faintly. Clearly, she did not take his words seriously. There were many miracles in this world, but it was clear that this miracle did not happen on their side. When everyone saw Lei Jinting, who should have been seriously injured, fly up the tower of Feihong Pass with great Qinggong, they could not help but feel shocked. At the same time, they rejoiced. Fortunately, when Wang Fei went down, Lei Jinting did not make a sneak attack. Otherwise, with just Qin Feng and the others, they may not be able to stop him. Lei Jinting stood leisurely on the tower, facing Yili. At this time, there was a river of blood on the tower. But people with discerning eyes knew that no matter how brave and good the Mahist army was, when the enemy was several times their number, failure was almost inevitable. Lei Jinting looked at Yi Li with a smile and said, Is Wang Fei wondering why I did not attack at the tower? Yi Li shook her head and said, Compared to this, I am more curious. How did Genom of Gojoseon recover in such a short time? No one knew Lei Jinting's injury better than Yi Li. Due to the improper treatment of the West Hills military doctors, Lei Jinting's injury would only be more serious than she had expected. Han Mingyue stood beside Yi Li and smiled gently. This is not strange. This one remembers that there is a method that can increase a person's potential in the shortest amount of time. Even if the person is seriously injured, they can exert more power in a short time. Lei Jinting looked coolly at Han Mingyue and said, Master Mingyue is indeed experienced and knowledgeable. Han Mingyue took a step forward and stood in front of Yi Li without a trace. He sighed and said, I would rather not know. There is nothing in the world that did not have a price. The method that Han Mingyue spoke of was so heaven-defying. Then the price that had to be paid was self-evident. Lei Jinting would do such a thing. It was clear that he did not plan on living. A martial arts master might not be scary, but a martial arts master who did not want to live was definitely scary. Looking at the proud Lei Jinting, Han Mingyue shook her head and said, Genom of Gojoseon is also a hero. Why do you have to take things so hard? Lei Jinting was not angry. There was not even a trace of emotion. At this point, it could be said that he had reached the end of the road. Although he did not understand how he had been tricked by Mo Xiaoyao, he had lost. It was not that he did not have the courage to admit defeat. But before this, he could still do something for the West Hill, or he could still stab Mo Xiaoyao viciously. Chapter 10:30. Genom of Gojoseon should know Mo Xiaoyao's temper. If something happens to Princess Ding, your hundreds of thousands of soldiers, Han Mingyue reminded him faintly. Lei Jinting smiled and nodded, saying, Many thanks for young Master Mingyu's reminder, but from the moment they followed I to attack Feihong Pass, they didn't plan on living. So, I'm afraid I cannot accept young Master Mingyu's kindness. Han Mingyue sighed. If he could, he really didn't want to fight with Lei Jinting. With his martial arts, in another 10 years, he might be able to fight Lei Jinting to a draw. But right now, there was nothing he could do. Also, the reversal method that Lei Jinting used was a method that could gather all the power in one's body in a short amount of time. In this situation, in 24 hours, Lei Jinting's power was twice as strong as usual. Not just him, even if Mo Xiaoyao came personally, it would be difficult. Lei Jinting examined Yi Li, who was standing next to Han Mingyue. He asked curiously, Wang Fei really doesn't blame Mo Xiaoyao at all? Yi Li raised her eyes and frowned slightly. This Fei doesn't understand Genom of Gojoseon's meaning. Lei Jinting laughed loudly and said, Wang Fei is a smart person. How can you not understand Ai's meaning? If it wasn't for Mo Xiaoyao's scheme, the 200,000 soldiers guarding Feihong Pass and Wang Fei's Qilin would not have been trapped by Ai at Feihong Pass. Now, they're about to be completely wiped out. Does Wang Fei not have any resentment in your heart? Yili lowered her eyes and thought for a moment before saying faintly, "This Fae is not good at making choices, but I know what it means to win the biggest victory with the smallest price." From a standpoint of the Prince Ding mansion, his decision is only beneficial. Why should this Fae have any resentment? Lei Jinting examined Yi Li for a moment. In the end, he could only sigh helplessly. "I was thinking, never mind. If Wang Fei had the same thoughts as other women, then she wouldn't be Princess Ding. Wang Fei, I have offended you." Finishing, Lei Jinting did not waste words. His gaze towards Yi Li was instantly filled with murderous intent, and an oppressive aura pressed towards Yi Li. Lei Jinting was not a person that liked to waste words. The reason that he had said so much to Yi Li was because he was certain that Imo Xiaoyao could not return so quickly. Also, he wanted to sow discord between Imo Xiaoyao and Yi Li. If Princess Ding died with resentment towards Prince Ding, what kind of blow would that be to Prince Ding, who loved his wife as much as his life? It was a pity that Yi Li's mind was unexpectedly tenacious and steady. She was not moved by him at all. Lei Jinting had no choice but to give up his plan with some regret. Without Lei Jinting speaking, Yi Li and the others knew that the present situation was unavoidable. Yi Li calmly took out 2 pistols, one on the left and one on the right. She pointed them at Lei Jinting. Lei Jinting looked curiously at the thing in her hand. "This is the thing that injured I?" Yi Li said with a faint smile. "Prince, you can try again." Before she finished speaking, there were 2 loud bangs. 2 bullets had already shot towards Lei Jinting. Lei Jinting's figure flashed, and he quickly dodged. The 2 shots missed, but Yi Li was not dispirited. She calmly continued to chase after Lei Jinting's figure. The pistols in her hand made loud bangs. The speed of the bullets was very fast, but Lei Jinting's speed seemed to be even faster. Everyone could only see a shadow moving freely on the city wall. When Yi Li stopped, Lei Jinting had reappeared on a battlement on the city wall. He lowered his head to look at the battle robe behind him. It was unknown when a small hole had appeared on the battle robe. Lei Jinting couldn't help but praise. "Good stuff. It's a pity. If there were more of these things, I might have to be a bit more cautious." However, it seems that Princess doesn't have many. Yi Li didn't hide it and nodded. "That's right. This consort only has 2 of them. Originally, I didn't expect to use them to deal with Jinnum of Gojoseon. She just wanted to see Lei Jinting's current strength. Now they saw that Lei Jinting's current strength was probably above Imo Xiaoyao and Ling Taian." Lei Jinting nodded and smiled. Since Princess Ding has already made a move, now it's Ai's turn. After saying this, Lei Jinting unsheathed the sword in his hand and swung it towards Yi Li's direction. Lei Jinting's move was very simple and ordinary, without any fancy moves. However, everyone present could feel the murderous aura and terrifying power within it. Han Mingyue's expression changed. At the same time, she unsheathed the sword in her hand and slashed towards Lei Jinting's sword aura. Qin Feng, Zhuijing, Wei Lin, and the others beside Yi Li also moved at the same time, wanting to block Lei Jinting's attack. Yi Li dodged to the side. After the battle with Ling Taihan, Yi Li already understood that when facing a true master of internal energy, she didn't have any advantage. The reason why she hadn't encountered any danger before was because she had never met masters of the same level as Lei Jinting and Ling Taihan. Yi Li took a deep breath and looked back at the Mahist army and the West Hill soldiers who were still fighting not far away. At this time, the 2 sides were already fighting face to face. It was a fight to the death. At this time, Lei Jinting's power was not something that Han Mingyue and the others could resist. Almost at the cost of burning his life, Lei Jinting's martial arts cultivation suddenly reached the peak of his life. With one blow, Han Mingyue and Zhuo Jing were sent flying more than 10 steps away. Qin Feng and Wei Lin hit the city wall and both spat out a mouthful of blood. Lei Jinting knocked down Han Mingyue and the other 3 with one blow and then ignored them. He directly slashed his sword at Yi Li. Yi Li hurriedly retreated a few steps. Then, Lei Jinting's sword aura followed her like a shadow. Seeing that there was no way out, Yi Li gritted her teeth and a cold light flashed in her hand. Instead of retreating, she rushed towards Lei Jinting. A smile flashed across Lei Jinting's lips. It was as if he was mocking Yi Li for overestimating herself. At the top of the city, a cold light flashed. In an instant, it attacked Lei Jinting as fast as lightning. Feeling the threat of a master of the same level, Lei Jinting immediately gave up on Yi Li and raised his hand to block the opponent's attack. Not far away, a figure in blue clothes stood on the city wall behind Yi Li. The person looked at Lei Jinting coldly and said, "Since when did Genom of Gojoseon like to bully the weak? Since you want to fight, why don't you come to me?" Yi Li dodged Lei Jinting's sword and panted slightly. She retreated to one side and left the battlefield to Ling Taihan. Lei Jinting looked regretfully at Yi Li, who had already retreated to Han Mingwei and the others. He looked at Ling Taihan and said, "You really know how to pick the right time." Ling Taihan said indifferently, "Didn't you ask me to come to you?" Lei Jinting frowned and said, "You can't possibly get here so quickly." According to his calculations, he should have finished dealing with everything by the time Ling Taihan arrived. Ling Taihan hugged his sword and said, "It is indeed impossible. But a few days ago, someone told me that if I didn't feel it sooner, I might not be able to see you." Now, it seems that he wasn't wrong. Lei Jinting's current appearance was very strong, but it was only for the next 48 hours. After 48 hours, not only would he lose all his martial arts, but he would also lose his life. Lei Jinting was also a first-class master in the world. Naturally, he would not understand the reason for Lei Jinting's current situation. And Mo Xiuyao again. He can even calculate such a situation? Lei Jinting frowned. Ling Taihan did not hide and nodded. "Yes, I saw him 10 days ago, but he told me that Genom of Gojoseon would definitely lose his life in 10 days. If he wanted to find you, it would be best to do it before 10 days. So, I arrived at Feihong Pass 2 days ago. I didn't expect to see a good show at that time." Lei Jinting naturally understood what he meant by a good show. However, at his level, there was nothing to be angry about. He shook the long sword in his hand and said, "In that case, let's do it. After killing you, we can still deal with Princess Ding. At this point, there is no difference whether I is here or not." The soldiers of West Hill had already received his orders. Once they attacked Feihong Pass, they did not need to care about anything. They just needed to destroy the entire Northwest as much as possible. When these soldiers and horses scattered all over the Northwest, even if Mo Xiuyao's million-strong army came back, it would still be a headache. Under such circumstances, it was not that important whether Lei Jinting was here or not. Ling Taihan nodded solemnly and said, "That's good. The grudges between us should have been settled long ago. If I die in your hands in this battle, it means that I am not as good as you. If you lose, I promise that I will not find trouble with Lei Tingfen." Lei Jinting smiled with satisfaction and said, "In that case, I will take advantage of you. Please, please." Princess, Qin Feng pressed on his throbbing wound with one hand and looked at the two people facing each other on the city wall. Especially when he looked at Ling Taihan, his gaze was even more complicated. Who would have thought that the one who saved the princess's life this time was Ling Taihan, who had almost killed the princess back then? They did not expect that the prince had secretly arranged such a move. If Ling Taihan had not arrived in time, it would have been difficult for them to save the princess from Lei Jinting with their martial arts. Yi Li nodded and said in a low voice, "Don't worry about them. Stop the West Hill soldiers from entering the pass at all costs." Qin Feng and the others nodded in unison and said, "We obey." Chapter 10:31. The great battle on top of the city gate tower should have attracted countless martial artists to come and watch. But at this time in Feihong Pass, no one had the time to care about this. Whether it was the West Hill soldiers who were eager to rush into the pass, or the Mahist army soldiers who were desperately resisting the enemy, no one was in the mood to watch this great battle. In everyone's heart, there was only one goal, and that was the enemy. The city gate was finally broken by the heavy giant wood. The Mahist army soldiers blocked the gate with their flesh and blood and fought with the enemy. On the city gate tower, on the streets, the soldiers of the two armies could be seen fighting everywhere. Whether it was the imminent death of Jinnum of Gojoseon or Princess Ding's willingness to live and die with the soldiers guarding the city, it greatly stimulated the morale of the soldiers of the two armies. No one was willing to take half a step back, and they fought a bloody battle. No one knew how long this bloody battle lasted. Almost everyone, including Yi Li, was covered in blood. When they were exhausted, they finally heard the sound of horse hooves coming from outside the pass. Feng Jiao was shocked. He suddenly jumped up and shouted, "The Black Cloud Cavalry is here. The prince is back." Suddenly, all the soldiers who were lucky enough to survive were shocked, especially when they heard the sound of horse hooves gradually approaching. Everyone's heart surged with an uncontrollable joy. The prince was finally back. The reinforcements were finally here. They had finally defended Feihong Pass. With the arrival of the Black Cloud Cavalry, the pressure on the guards of the city gates suddenly decreased a lot. The Shilling army that was still outside the city could not help but be confused because of this sudden change. The Black Cloud Cavalry took advantage of the gap and rushed directly into the city. The rider at the front of the Black Cloud Cavalry was wearing white clothes and had white hair. He had an awe-inspiring aura. Closed the front and back gates. Although Feihong Pass was called a pass, there was still a small city inside the pass. However, this city was not big, and most of the people living in it were soldiers who were stationed here. There were very few ordinary people. Because of the impending war, the civilians had already retreated to the rear. At this moment, the city was filled with Mahist army soldiers. Once the city gates were closed, the West Hill soldiers who had not yet entered the city would naturally have to expend effort to attack again, while the West Hill soldiers who had already entered the city would be trapped in the city. Li, and Mo Xiaoyao urged his horse to gallop through the streets. A few West Hill soldiers who were foolish enough to try to sneak up on them were whipped a few dozen feet away. Finally, he saw the slender figure at a corner of the street. Her white robes had already been stained with blood. Even from afar, one could still see that her beautiful face was also stained with blood. In that instant, Mo Xiaoyao felt as if his heart had been whipped by a whip. It was so painful that it felt like it was being torn apart. Xiaoyao. Suddenly hearing Mo Xiaoyao's figure, Yi Li panicked for a moment. She had already lost count of how many people she had killed today. Her entire person seemed to emit a thick stench of blood. At this moment, suddenly hearing Mo Xiaoyao's voice, for a moment, she only felt that it was both real and illusory. "Careful!" Han Mingwei shouted in a low voice. She threw the sword in her hand at the West Hill soldiers behind Yi Li who were preparing to sneak up on her. At the same time, Mo Xiaoyao leapt from his horse. Like a swan crossing water, he leapt in front of Yi Li and raised his hand to pull her into his embrace. "Xiaoyao!" Yi Li was startled. Only now did she clearly see the person hugging her. Mo Xiaoyao tightly held the person in his arms. For the first time in his life, he felt incomparable fear. He, Mo Xiaoyao, was a person who could take every conceivable possibility into account. Everyone in the world could be played in the palm of his hand. But this time he had really miscalculated. He could not imagine what he would do if something really happened to Yi Li. Mo Xiaoyao held Yi Li with one hand and waved the horsewhip in his other hand. Streams of energy shot out in all directions like poisonous arrows. For a moment, not a single West Hill soldier within 100 feet of them was spared. The West Hill soldiers in the distance did not dare to come forward because of Prince Ding's reputation. Han Mingwei drew her sword from the body of the fallen West Hill soldier. She stepped forward and said, "You're finally back." Mo Xiaoyao nodded. For the first time in more than 10 years, he looked at Han Mingwei with such seriousness. In a low voice, he said, "Thank you." Like Yi Li, Han Mingwei was also covered in blood. The image of an elegant gentleman no longer existed. Moreover, Han Mingwei had many wounds on her body. It was clear that Han Mingwei had always been by Yi Li's side to protect him. Han Mingwei smiled faintly, even though her face was still stained with the blood of the enemy. The smile in her eyes had some of the warmth of the moonlight breeze and the elegant demeanor of the famous Master Mingyu of the past. Han Mingyue knew that after this battle, the estrangement between them for so many years could be completely resolved. Han Mingyue understood Mo Xiaoyao's character well enough. Mo Xiaoyao would not hate him. He would only ignore him forever. He would treat him as if he had never had a friend and brother. When she walked out of the fog of infatuation, Han Mingyue finally realized what she had lost for this hopeless relationship. Mo Xiaoyao's return naturally caused a big commotion. After a while, Feng Jiao and the others also rushed over. Feng Jiao did not have time to exchange pleasantries. He hurriedly asked Mo Xiaoyao, "How many people did you bring back?" Mo Xiaoyao said 30,000. Feng Jiao's face suddenly became very ugly. There were hundreds of thousands of West Hill soldiers. 30,000 people were useless. Mo Xiaoyao said calmly, "Don't worry. Leng Huai will bring people here soon. We just need to delay the West Hill people as much as possible and block them in the Feihong Pass in the small town." At this point, there was nothing more to say. Feng Jiao also directly turned around. "I know, but I don't know how much time we can delay. What if someone breaks out?" Mo Xiaoyao frowned and said, "There are soldiers stationed in every county. Although there are not many, it is enough to block some of the remaining soldiers." Yi Li said lightly, "I have ordered all the people within 100 miles of the Feihong Pass to fight to the death and retreat." Hearing this, everyone was happy. Except for Yi Li and the others, no one had thought of this idea. Although it was not easy to make all the people retreat, with the prestige of the Prince Ding mansion, as long as Princess Ding personally gave the order, at least 80 to 90% of the people would retreat. Everyone heaved a sigh of relief after solving the problem they were most worried about. Feng Jiao said with a smile, "In this case, we will do our best to stop the Shilling army. We will definitely be able to hold on until General Leng arrives. Princess Consort, I will take my leave." As long as the people did not suffer heavy casualties, even if some houses and crops were destroyed, it would not be a particularly big loss for the Mahist army. Although they had been fighting for years, the foundation of the entire Northwest was not damaged because of these years of planning and development. "I will take my leave," everyone said in unison. They all turned around and rushed to their respective battlefields. By the way, Lei Jinting and Tower Master Ling are still on the tower. Yi Li just remembered, but she herself was not sure how much time had passed in this fierce battle. But Lei Jinting did not appear again. If the two were not still fighting, or if Lei Jinting had died in battle, then the two of them had died together. Chapter 1032. Mo Xiaoyao wasn't worried at all about Ling Taihan, who had been tricked into helping him. Ling Taihan wanted to take revenge on Lei Jinting anyways. He was just giving him a chance to save his subordinate. Even though Ling Taihan had accidentally saved Yi Li, he wouldn't feel guilty if Ling Taihan lost his life because of this. Mo Xiaoyao took off his cloak and put on Yi Li. He said softly, "Lily, go back and change your clothes first." Yi Li rolled her eyes at him, then turned and walked towards the city gate tower. The battle on the city gate tower was still ongoing. Lei Jinting's reversal technique was indeed shocking. With Ling Taihan's cultivation, even if Lei Jinting wasn't injured, he wouldn't be a match for him. But when Yi Li and the others arrived, the one covered in injuries was actually Ling Taihan. However, Ling Taihan had spent his entire life studying martial arts. His personality was tenacious. Even though he was covered in injuries, he didn't seem to have any intention of stopping. Hearing Mo Xiaoyao and the others walk up the city gate tower, Lei Jinting was the first to retreat. "Mo Xiaoyao, it's you again." Lei Jinting narrowed his eyes as he stared at Mo Xiaoyao. Perhaps it was because of this battle, or because Mo Xiaoyao had returned early, or because his plan had been foiled, his originally deep and desolate eyes were somewhat bloodshot. Mo Xiaoyao raised his eyebrows indifferently. Only Yi Li, whose hand he was holding, could tell that he wasn't as calm as he looked. Mo Xiaoyao laughed. "Of course it's I. I'm the one who's curious. Why aren't you dead yet?" Lei Jinting sneered. "You haven't died yet, so how can I die?" After saying that, Lei Jinting ignored Ling Taihan and flew towards Mo Xiaoyao. However, The sword in his hand was pointed straight at Yi Li, who was standing beside Mo Xiaoyao. Mo Xiaoyao's expression changed as he sent Yi Li behind Han Mingyue. He then unsheathed his incineration sword and swung it towards Lei Jinting mercilessly. Lei Jinting, I will make sure you die a horrible death. Mo Xiaoyao sneered. In the blink of an eye, the two of them began to exchange blows. Lei Jinting didn't show any signs of weakness as he laughed. We still don't know who will die a horrible death. It had to be said that even people like Han Mingyue and Ling Taihan were secretive about the heaven-defying effects of the reversal technique. After the battle between Lei Jinting and Ling Taihan, it didn't seem like he had used up too much energy. He was still as fast as lightning when he fought with Mo Xiaoyao. This feeling almost reminded Mo Xiaoyao of the first time he fought with Lei Jinting more than 10 years ago when he just came out of the pugilistic world. At that time, his martial arts were slightly inferior to Lei Jinting's. But now, Mo Xiaoyao was in the prime of his life, while Lei Jinting was gradually aging. Mo Xiaoyao had absolute confidence that his martial arts cultivation was stronger than Lei Jinting's. But even so, when he fought with Lei Jinting, Mo Xiaoyao still felt a trace of pressure. Seeing this, Ling Taihan didn't hesitate to join the battle. In this situation, there was no such thing as bullying with numbers. Lei Jinting had used the reversal technique, so he was already dead. There was no need for the people present to die with him. More importantly, it was impossible for Mo Xiaoyao to back out now. Since that was the case, Ling Taihan didn't mind fighting with two of them. With the suppression of two powerful experts, Lei Jinting was finally at a disadvantage. But even so, Ling Taihan and Mo Xiaoyao still had many new wounds. This battle lasted from day to night. Yi Li and Han Mingyue couldn't interfere at all, but neither of them dared to take half a step away. All they could do was watch the three people fighting. Seeing the most dangerous part, Han Mingyue finally couldn't help but shout and laugh loudly. Yi Li stood to the side and watched, a faint smile on her lips. Han Mingyue watched the battle between the three powerful experts of the world and unexpectedly broke through her mental state. Her martial arts that had been stagnant for many years reached a new level. Presumably, in a few years, young Master Mingyu's name would be among the top 4 experts of the world. Under the night sky, the entire Feihong Pass was still brightly lit. In the small city, there were countless soldiers fighting in every street and alley. The smell of blood permeated the entire city. On the back of the city wall, old General Yuan Pei and a few soldiers were stationed on the city gate tower. Under the city gate tower was a city gate that was only a third of the width of the Feihong Pass in front of them. But behind this gate was more than half of the northwest region. All of the soldiers were exhausted, but they still held their weapons tightly in their hands. Again and again, they killed the enemies that were charging at them. Behind them were the people and land they had to protect. They had nowhere to retreat. They had no other choice but to kill the enemies in the city gate. Another wave of West Hill soldiers rushed over the streets and the interception of the Maoist army soldiers. Yuan Pei's expression was solemn as he said in a clear voice, "Archers, fire!" Arrows shot out like rain. A group of enemies fell, but soon more people continued to rush up. The soldiers guarding the city gate rushed up and engaged in close combat with the enemies who had rushed out from the arrows. Just when everyone thought that these days would never end, the heavy sound of horse hooves finally sounded in the distance again. Even from afar, people could feel the sound of the earth shaking. It was the sound of thousands of soldiers and horses rushing over. At this time, everyone knew who was coming. The tired faces of the Maoist army soldiers once again bloomed with radiance. Reinforcements are coming. Reinforcements are coming. Brothers, kill them. Stop the West Hill people. Reinforcements are coming. The cheers of the Maoist army soldiers could be heard throughout the small city. Then the battle between the two sides became more intense. Leng Huai led 1,000,000 soldiers into the Feihong Pass. The hundreds of thousands of soldiers and horses of West Hill immediately collapsed. Originally, hundreds of thousands of soldiers and horses were blocked in the city for an entire day by the Maoist army. They had suffered heavy casualties and were already somewhat disorganized. At this time, there was suddenly an additional 1,000,000 soldiers. No matter how tenacious the willpower of the West Hill soldiers was, they could not help but collapse. Before dawn, the battle in the small city had already come to an end. The West Hill soldiers in the city either died or surrendered. When Leng Huai rushed to the rear gate with his men, he was just in time to support Yuan Pei, who was a little shaky. General Yuan was over 70 years old. This day and night of fighting was already very tiring for a young man, let alone an old man like Yuan Pei. Seeing Leng Huai, Yuan Pei was also relieved. If Leng Huai had come a little later, they would not have been able to hold on. General Leng Huai apologized. General Yuan, it's me. We're late. Thank you for your hard work. It's good that you're here. It's good that you're here, Yuan Pei said repeatedly. Then he only felt darkness in front of him and fell down. Leng Huai reacted quickly and hurriedly supported him. General Yuan, Doctor. Feng Sen happened to be coming over as well. When he heard Leng Huai's voice, he quickly rushed over. He held Yuan Pei's hand and felt his pulse. Then he was relieved and said, "It's nothing serious. He's probably too tired. Let's send General Yuan back first. Let Mr. Shun treat him later." Chapter 1033. Seeing that Yuan Pei was fine, Leng Huai breathed a sigh of relief. Yuan Pei could be said to be the oldest veteran in the Mahist army. If something happened here, it would be a great loss for the Mahist army. After sending people to escort Yuan Pei back to the general's mansion, Leng Huai and Feng Jiao ordered the soldiers who had just arrived to search the streets to see if there were any West Hill soldiers who had escaped. By the time they finished arranging all this, the sky was already bright. Only then did the two of them breathe a sigh of relief. They looked at each other. Feng Jiao suddenly shouted, "The prince and Wang Fei are still on the city gate tower." If Mo Xiaoyao had finished off Lei Jinting, he would certainly appear with Yi Li to preside over the situation. The reason they had not seen the two of them until now must be that the battle on the city gate tower had not ended. When the two of them hurried to the city gate tower of Feihong Pass, Qin Feng and the others had already arrived. Although they were all covered in wounds and were either leaning against or sitting on the city gate tower without confidence, all of their expressions were incomparably relaxed. Feng Jiao could not help but smile. He shrugged and walked to the stairs on the side to help Qin Feng sit down under the city wall. After this battle, they would not have to fight for a long time. Shouldn't they be relaxed? As a soldier, it might be a kind of sorrow to not have the chance to go to the battlefield in their lifetime. But as a country, if they were to spend their entire life in war, it would be better for the country to perish early. Seeing Feng Jiao, Leng Huai, and the others appear one after another, Lei Jinting finally understood that he had lost to the Mahist army again. His attacks became fiercer and fiercer. However, after a day and night of intense fighting, Lei Jinting's exhaustion was far greater than that of Ling Taihan and Mo Xiaoyao. No matter how powerful the reversal technique was, it couldn't guarantee that Lei Jinting would be invincible in these 48 hours. Even if he was powerful, he would still be severely injured by Ling Taihan and Mo Xiaoyao, the two strongest experts in the world. As a human, even if he used up all his life force, there was still a limit. Therefore, after a few fierce attacks, Mo Xiaoyao and Ling Taihan could clearly feel the changes in Lei Jinting. The two of them glanced at each other. Ling Taihan's long sword streaked across the air and went straight for Lei Jinting's chest. Behind him, Mo Xiaoyao leapt into the air. His sword went straight for Lei Jinting's head. Lei Jinting laughed coldly. He dodged Mo Xiaoyao's sword and grabbed Ling Taihan's long sword with one hand. Then, following Ling Taihan's sword, he rushed up and slapped his palm towards Ling Taihan's chest. Mo Xiaoyao had been waiting for this moment. The sword on his head was just a feint. The death acupuncture point on the head was such an important position. Unless Lei Jinting couldn't move, he wouldn't let others stab him so easily. Mo Xiaoyao's sword changed direction. The incineration sword flashed across the air and entered Lei Jinting's right shoulder. Lei Jinting's palm paused. Ling Taian twisted the sword in his hand and pulled it out of Lei Jinting's hand. He lowered his body and slashed towards Lei Jinting's legs with Mo Xiaoyao. Suddenly receiving Mo Xiaoyao's sword, Lei Jinting quickly leapt out of the way in pain. He dodged Mo Xiaoyao and Ling Taihan's two swords. However, his left leg was still cut by Ling Taihan's sword. Lei Jinting retreated all the way to the city wall before stopping. He lowered his head to look at the wound on his right shoulder and frowned. This sword wound wasn't important. However, his right shoulder had been injured by Yi Li's spear a few days ago. The injury hadn't fully healed yet. Now, that Mo Xiaoyao's sword had struck him. It was like adding salt to the wound. Moreover, the reversal technique didn't allow him to completely ignore pain. Countless wounds and pain were added to his body, causing his strength to be greatly reduced. Mo Xiaoyao and Ling Taihan weren't in a hurry. They both gripped their swords tightly and looked at Lei Jinting with indifferent expressions. At this point, with Lei Jinting's personality, he definitely wouldn't run away. He probably wanted to drag someone down with him. Lei Jinting smiled faintly and said, "To be able to fight with Prince Ding and the Yinwang Chamber of Commerce's leader, Ai's life wasn't in vain." Ling Taihan's expression was indifferent and didn't say anything. Mo Xiaoyao coldly smiled and said, "I never planned to fight with you. I only want one thing. You die, I live." Lei Jinting was stunned. He couldn't help but laugh towards the sky. Prince Ding really is Prince Ding. Mo Liufang's good son, Mo Xiaoyao. If Ling Taihan wasn't here today, the one who would die at Ai's hands would definitely be you. The most unpredictable thing in the world was people. However, Mo Xiaoyao was able to predict people's hearts. That was why even an expert like Ling Taihan could be ordered around by him. Perhaps Yili was right. The Prince Ding mansion was destroyed because of people's sinister hearts. Mo Xiaoyao learned from this painful experience and could actually see through people's desires and intentions. That was why he lost at his hands. Mo Xiaoyao didn't care about Lei Jinting's mockery. He calmly said, "If Pavilion Master Ling wasn't here, you wouldn't have died here. I naturally have other ways to kill you." Lei Jinting laughed loudly. Everyone present looked at each other. No one understood what he was laughing about. Perhaps even he didn't understand. When he finally finished laughing, Lei Jinting stood up again. He pointed his sword at Mo Xiaoyao and said, "Good, good. I will take a look. How can Prince Ding make I die?" Mo Xiaoyao's lips curved into a cold smile. "I want you to live a life worse than death." The atmosphere on the city gate tower changed again. Everyone couldn't help but hold their breaths as they stared at the three people facing off. The battle of life and death between the three people with the highest achievements in martial arts in the world was about to be decided. At the same time, it also meant that the final winner of this battle for supremacy that had lasted for many years was about to appear. Even though many people already knew who the world would belong to, they still couldn't help but feel their hearts tremble. Chapter 1034. On the city walls, a few dazzling rays of light flashed. Three silhouettes rose from the ground at lightning speed. Then, they engaged in a fierce battle. Ordinary martial artists would not be able to see their fight clearly. They could only see countless shadows flitting through the air and the sword chi coming from all directions. Everyone retreated to a safe place and looked up to watch this epic battle. The only one who could make out the situation was Han Mingwei. But at this time, Han Mingwei was also staring at the three people fighting in the sky. She was so focused that she did not have the mind to answer the question of the people beside her. With a loud bang, before anyone could react, a black figure fell from the sky and heavily smashed into the ground above the city gate tower. Han Mingwei and Qin Feng stood in front of Yili, one on the left and one on the right. When everyone looked over, they saw Lei Jinting lying on the ground. His right wrist and legs were bleeding profusely. Lei Jinting lay on the ground with a dispirited expression. His eyes were dim and his face was pale. Han Mingwei looked over and relaxed. Lei Jinting's martial arts had been crippled and his limbs were injured. He no longer had any killing power. Very quickly, Mo Xiaoyao and Ling Taihan landed on the ground at the same time. The two of them were not in good condition. Mo Xiaoyao's snow-white robes were stained with blood. The wound on his left arm was even more shocking. Ling Taihan's blue robes had a long tear. A thin wound ran across his neck. If he was injured a little more, both of them would have been injured. Xiaoyao. Yili looked at Mo Xiaoyao's injuries and frowned slightly. Mo Xiaoyao was in an extremely good mood. After dealing with Lei Jinting, Mo Xiaoyao had dealt with almost all the people he wanted to deal with. Even the trace of gloominess between his brows had dissipated by quite a bit. Li, I won, Mo Xiaoyao said with a smile. Yili nodded slightly and said softly, I know. Cough, cough. Lei Jinting, who had fallen to the ground, coughed twice and coughed out a mouthful of blood. He looked back at Mo Xiaoyao and asked, Why didn't you kill me? Mo Xiaoyao said coldly, I said, I will make your life worse than death. I always keep my word. Lei Jinting laughed disdainfully. I never thought that Prince Ding would also like to torture captives. Since you admit that you're a captive, that's enough. There are many things you don't know. Mo Xiaoyao laughed. Do you want to know how I plan to treat you? Mo Xiaoyao's eyes suddenly shot out a fierce light, as if he didn't want to tear Lei Jinting apart, but still had to endure and let him live. Before Lei Jinting could open his mouth, a sword light flashed from his side. Mo Xiaoyao flew into a rage. Ling Taihan, you're looking for death. Ling Taihan's sword pierced Lei Jinting's chest, and blood flew out. Looking at the bloody hole in Lei Jinting's chest, he was breathing more than he was breathing in. It was obvious that he wouldn't survive. Ling Taihan was originally standing closer to Mo Xiaoyao, and Mo Xiaoyao was supporting Yili with one hand. Ling Taihan's sword was fast and ruthless. How could Mo Xiaoyao block it in time? After Lei Jinting was stabbed by Ling Taihan, not only did he not feel any pain, he even looked at Mo Xiaoyao with a mocking smile. It was as if he was saying, Didn't you want me to live a life worse than death? I was going to die now. Ha! Ling Taihan, 13th brother, many thanks. Lei Jinting smiled faintly. His dim gaze swept past Mo Xiaoyao and Yili, and a trace of regret and worry flashed across his eyes. However, he was unable to say anything. Slowly, the last trace of light in his eyes faded away. Xiaoyao. Yili grabbed Mo Xiaoyao's hand that was about to slap Ling Taihan. She said softly, I'm a bit tired. Let's go back and rest. Mo Xiaoyao's gaze warmed. He lowered his head to look at Yi Li's beautiful face and the traces of blood that had not been wiped away. His eyes became even more apologetic. All right, let's go back and rest. General Lung, Feng San, I'll leave this place to you. Feng Jiao nodded with a bitter expression. He also hadn't rested for a day and night. Okay? Yili turned back to say to Ling Taihan, Tower Master Ling can rest in the city before you leave. Mr. Chun have a lot of medicine. Ling Taihan cupped his hands and said, Many thanks, Princess. Seeing Mo Xiaoyao and Yili leave hand in hand, Feng Jiao turned back to look at Lei Jinting's corpse on the ground. He frowned and said, How should we deal with this? Even though they were enemies, Lei Jinting was an ambitious and ruthless person. Feng Jiao didn't want to humiliate him too much. As the saying goes, a dead person's debts disappear. No matter how much hatred there was, what was a dead person? However, if Lei Jinting fell into Mo Xiaoyao's hands, he would probably die without a complete corpse. Leng Huai raised his eyebrows. He had the same thoughts as Feng Jiao. Leng Huai was a military general of orthodox birth. He always had some respect for famous generals. Unless it was necessary, he normally wouldn't humiliate the enemy's corpse outside of the battlefield. That was the behavior of the weak. Ling Taihan glanced at Lei Jinting on the ground and said, Is it possible for me to bring him back to Xiling? Of course. Leng Huai and Feng San looked at each other. Feng Jiao said, But he must be cremated at the Prince Ding mansion. Pavilion Master Ling can only bring his ashes back. It wasn't that Feng Jiao was too cautious. After the incident of Mo Xiaoyao coming back from the dead, Feng Jiao really didn't want to take the slightest risk. Ling Taihan didn't mind. He was already very loyal to his friends by collecting Lei Jinting's corpse. He nodded and said, "It doesn't matter. I can wait a few days." Feng Jiao said, "There's no need to wait a few days. It will be done soon." He didn't want Ling Taian to wait here for a few days. It seemed that the prince's anger towards Lei Jinting had not subsided. Maybe he would come to find trouble with Ling Taian after he recovered. If that was all, it would be fine. Ling Taian was now seriously injured. There was no need for the prince to come out. The Princeton mansion had plenty of ways to kill him, but it seemed that the consort didn't want Ling Taian to die. If the consort was angry with the prince, it wouldn't be good for them as subordinates. Ling Huai naturally didn't think as much as Feng Jiao. He looked at Feng Jiao strangely. He thought that there was nothing wrong and nodded in agreement. Ling Taian nodded and said, "Thank you very much. Pavilion Master Ling, you're welcome." "Speaking of which, we should thank Pavilion Master Ling," Feng Jiao said sincerely. No matter the reason, it was a fact that Ling Taian had saved their lives, including the consorts. If Ling Taian hadn't come in time, it would have been hard to say what would have happened today. Yi Li and Mo Xiaoyao returned to the general's fu. After freshening up, Mo Xiaoyao came out and saw Yi Li sitting at the table staring at the food in front of her. Even though they had just gone through a great battle that had almost wiped out the entire army, the servants of the general's fu still did their best to prepare a delicious breakfast. Not long after the two had returned, it was ready for the two to eat after they had freshened up. After freshening up, Yi Li had changed out of her bloodied clothing and washed away the tiredness and blood on her face. She appeared even more beautiful and moving. Seeing her in a daze as she stared at the food in front of her, Mo Xiaoyao frowned in displeasure. He instinctively felt displeased. Lightly walking forward, he hugged her from behind. Mo Xiaoyao asked softly, "Li, what are you thinking about?" Chapter 1035. Yi Li came back to her senses and shook her head. "It's nothing. I've been so tense these days. I don't know what to do now that I've relaxed." Mo Xiaoyao rubbed her hair apologetically and said softly, "It's all my fault. Ali, there won't be anything that can upset you in the future. I'll do whatever you want to do in the future, okay?" That's right. From now on, there was nothing that could annoy him. There was no one in this world that could threaten his Lily. The northern tribes had been defeated. They would not be able to recover for the next 30 to 50 years. Lei Jinting was dead. Most of the elite soldiers of West Hill were left at Feihong Pass. In the south, they still had to face the 300,000 soldiers led by Murong Shun and Marquis Nan from the Dechu state. There was also the enmity between the Jinnan Palace and the Emperor of Xiling. With Lei Tengfeng's ability, it was good enough that he could protect himself. As for the Dechu state in the south, Mo Jingli had been exiled. A child who had not yet reached adulthood had ascended the throne. The power was only in the hands of the ministers and the Empress Dowager. They would not be able to cause any trouble. In the future, who in the world would dare to touch his Miss Li? Yi Li looked at him in surprise. Mo Xiaoyao blinked and smiled. "Miss Li, why are you looking at me like that?" Yi Li asked, "Are you planning to withdraw the troops? We've finished fighting. What else can we do but withdraw?" Mo Xiaoyao smiled. Yi Li was silent. She did not expect Mo Xiaoyao to withdraw so soon. These days, Mo Xiaoyao's plans and strategies gave her a bad feeling. It was not that there was anything wrong with being ambitious. Mo Xiaoyao had the ability and the qualifications to conquer the world. He even had the world under his control. But perhaps it was because these days, each battle was crueler than the last, that she developed an uncontrollable hatred for war. He had seen too many dead people in the past few years. Pulling Yi Li into his embrace, Mo Xiaoyao's handsome face carried a gentle smile. He gently patted Yi Li's back and said softly, "Li Li, are you tired? Why don't you rest for a while?" Yi Li nodded unconsciously. She leaned against Mo Xiaoyao and slowly closed her eyes. She was indeed a little tired. When Yi Li was fast asleep, Mo Xiaoyao gently carried her to the bed. Mo Xiaoyao leaned over to look at Yi Rant's beautiful face that was frowning slightly in her sleep. He tenderly raised his hand and gently traced her face. He whispered with a smile, "Silly Li, how could I not know what you were thinking? What's more, If I were to finish playing, wouldn't Imo Xiaobao become a prodigal? He gently covered Yi Li with a blanket. Imo Xiaoyao turned around and left the room. There were a few lines of himself written on the top of the rice paper, placed outside the room. It was obvious that the owner of the writing had forgotten to keep it in a hurry. When the soldiers left the Huai border, the roads were clear. Crows flew in the cold sky. Pitiful white bones piled up in a lonely grave, all for the general's military achievements. Using this poem to describe the Maoist army might be a little biased, but it was also obvious that the writer's thoughts and feelings about the current situation. Yi Li was indeed very tired. When she woke up, the sky had already darkened. If Imo Xiaoyao wasn't worried that it would be bad for her body if she didn't eat for too long, she might have continued to sleep. Yi Li sat up and looked at Imo Xiaoyao, who was sitting leisurely by her bed. He didn't change at all before she fell asleep. She knew that he hadn't rested at all. In fact, Yi Li and the guards of Feihong Pass were not the only ones who were tired. Imo Xiaoyao heard that Yi Li was still in Feihong Pass halfway, so he rushed back with his men. Then there was a big battle with Lei Jinting. It was impossible to say that he wasn't tired. Why didn't you rest? Yi Li frowned and asked softly. Imo Xiaoyao shook his head with a smile and said softly, looking at Yi Li, I'm not tired. Yi Li has slept for a long time. It's time to get up and have some dinner. Yi Li looked at the man with a gentle smile in front of her speechlessly. It was as if the gloominess and ruthlessness when facing Lei Jinting and Ling Taihan had never existed. Looking at her silent appearance, Imo Xiaoyao retracted his smile and pulled Yi Li into his embrace, asking softly, Is Yi Li angry at me? Yi Li was silent for a moment. Then she sighed softly and shook her head, saying, No, I know you're right. Imo Xiaoyao fell silent as well. After a while, he smiled and looked at Yi Li, saying, It's just that you can't accept it, right? That's right. This time, I did it on purpose. How could those trash of Mo Jinglis be able to hurt me? Actually, I already had this plan when Yi Li handed me the list of infinite Boundless Mountain spies. I understand Mo Jingli. I know what he will do when forced into a corner. Li, you see. Now, everything is developing as I imagined. It's just that I didn't think that Yi Li actually didn't listen to me and leave Feihong Pass. If it weren't for Ling Taihan, even if he had arrived. Fortunately, I was right to leave Ling Taihan alive back then. Mo Xiaoyao's hands around Yi Li's waist trembled slightly. However, he lowered his head and looked at Yi Li with a faint smile in his eyes and in his low voice. Such a stubborn smile made Yi Li feel even more bitter in her heart. She couldn't blame this man. Yi Li gently leaned into Mo Xiaoyao's embrace and thought silently. No matter how many things he did, no matter how many ideas he had that she couldn't agree with or accept, she would never be able to blame him. This wasn't his fault. He wanted revenge. He wanted to protect his family and loved ones. He wanted the Prince Ding mansion to continue existing in this world. He wanted to get the most returns with the least effort. No matter how one looked at it, he wasn't wrong. Mo Xiaoyao gently hugged Yi Li and kissed her hair. He chuckled softly and said, I really want to hide Yi Li in the safest and most beautiful palace in the world, where no one can see and no one can ever hurt Yi Li. But I can't do that. I know Yi Li doesn't like that. So, I want Yi Li to stand with me and face everything together, even if Yi Li doesn't like it. Yi Li, don't hate me, okay? Even if I know you hate these things, I'd rather tear them apart in front of you and show them to you. Because this was Mo Xiaoyao. Mo Xiaoyao wasn't a noble young master, nor was he an otherworldly immortal. Mo Xiaoyao was an Azura from hell who climbed out a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood. Although Li was never a delicate flower raised in a greenhouse, Yi Li's heart was always kind and soft. How could she like this kind of bloody and cruel calculation and bloody battlefield? But what to do? Mo Xiaoyao only wants you to be with him. Xiaoyao. Yi Li sighed softly. She raised her head and looked into his gentle but stubborn eyes. She raised her hand and touched his snow-white hair. She whispered, It's not your fault. Why would I blame you? I'm just a little sad. I really want to convince myself that their sacrifice was worth it. Even if all 200,000 soldiers in Fei Hong Pass died, it would at least shorten the time of war by several years. During this period, the number of soldiers and civilians sacrificed would be more than 200,000. What's more, what does my sadness count as? I don't even know the names of most of the people, so how can I be sad for them? With so many people, even if I'm sad to death, I can only give them feelings for less than half a quarter of an hour. What does my sadness count as to them? It's just that each of them has a family, relatives, and children. Their pain will last for a lifetime. So, Xiao Yao, I'm fine. I'm really just a little sad. Soon, I'll be fine. Chapter 1036. Imo Xiao lowered his head and gently patted Yi Li's back, comforting her silently. Yi Li, who saw everything so clearly, gave people a sense of vulnerability that they had never felt before. Imo Xiao held her in his arms, with stubborn persistence and regret on his thin lips. I'm sorry, Li, Imo Xiao said in a low voice. He was sorry for her, but he would not admit his mistake. Like Yi Li, as the highest commander of the Mahist army, he did not make any wrong decisions. Even if the Mahist army could not rescue them in time, and all the soldiers in Fei Hong Pass were killed in battle, and even if the West Hill soldiers broke into Fei Hong Pass and wreaked havoc, no one could say that Prince Ding's decision was wrong. He led the Mahist army, which was several times smaller than the enemy's, to face the siege of 3 countries. This time, he finished the battle in one fell swoop, greatly shortening the time of the war. As a superior, he was right. The only person he was sorry for was his wife, his lover. He let her bear so many pain and choices that she should not have to bear, and let her personally ruin the Qi Lin that she had trained and built by herself. From the beginning to the end, he, Imo Xiao, had only let down Yi Li, his most beloved wife, who he had once decided to protect forever and make him happy and carefree. It's okay, Yi Li said softly, but her heart was full of tenderness. No matter what he did, she would forgive him. Yi Li smiled faintly in her heart. It turned out that long ago, she had already loved him so much. Li, it will never happen again. Okay, I know. The faint pain in her heart might never disappear, but it would gradually fade away. There was never anything perfect in life, but now it was already very good. A man who could turn the world upside down, but who would be uneasy because of your mood, a few smart, cute, and clever children, a group of family members who would always think of you sincerely, and a group of loyal friends and subordinates. What was there to be unsatisfied with such a life? Perhaps she and Imo Xiao would never have the same ideas. For example, she did not like schemes, but he was best at killing people without paying for it. For example, she always believed that life was precious, but he did not mind playing with the lives of irrelevant people. But he would give in for her, and she would tolerate him. That was enough. Princess, please come. This subordinate requests an audience. Feng Jiao's voice sounded from outside the door. Not long after, Imo Xiao and Yi Li appeared in the parlor outside hand in hand. Feng Jiao was not the only one who came. Leng Huai, Han Mingyue, He Su, and even General Yuan Pei, who had fainted in the morning, were all present. Seeing the two come in hand, Feng Jiao inwardly sighed in relief. Feng Jiao was not only Imo Xiao's childhood friend, he could also be considered Yi Li's good friend. Young Master Feng San naturally knew more about these 2 people than the others. Originally, he thought that there would be some conflict between the 2 of them, but he didn't expect that nothing would happen. Feng Jiao couldn't help but look at Yi Li a few more times. His evaluation of Yi Li increased. Receiving Imo Xiao's warning gaze, Feng Jiao coughed lightly and withdrew his gaze. He smiled and said, Princess, sorry for the disturbance. Imo Xiao glanced at him coolly and said, You still know? What are you doing here so late? Yi Li helplessly raised her hand and pulled. She smiled at Yuan Pei and said, Old General, are you feeling better? Yuan Pei hurriedly said, Many thanks for Princess's concern. This general is well. It's just that I'm old and a bit useless. I made Princess laugh. Yili smiled and said, Old General, what are you saying? This time, it's all thanks to Old General's presence. Li is right. Old General Yuan, please sit. Seeing Yi Li's gaze on him, Mo Shuyao also said with a smile, Everyone hasn't eaten dinner yet. Why don't we eat together? Feng Jiao silently rolled his eyes. It's you and Princess who haven't eaten dinner yet, right? Since Prince Ding personally invited them, they naturally couldn't refuse. In a moment, the maids delivered the prepared dinner. It was all very bland food. These days, everyone was very tired and no one seriously ate a meal. For a moment, their appetites were greatly stimulated and they happily ate a sumptuous and delicious dinner. After the maids removed the leftovers, Mo Shuyao asked, Why are you here so late? Is there something urgent? Leng Huai stood up and said, Reporting to Prince, we want to ask, how should we deal with the captives in West Hill? In fact, this wasn't an urgent matter. However, they were dragged here by Feng Jiao. At this moment, Feng Jiao looked like he had eaten and drank enough and pretended to be dead. Leng Huai had no choice but to bring up this matter. Although it wasn't urgent, it wasn't a small matter. There were nearly 100,000 captives in West Hill. With so many people, it was a big problem no matter where they were placed. No matter how they dealt with it, it would be troublesome. Hearing this, Mo Shioyao's eyes flashed. He was about to speak, but paused when he saw Yili beside him. He pondered for a moment and said, Send someone back to West Hill. We don't need much. 50 taels of silver per soldier. Leng Huai hesitated. Will the West Hill people agree? 50 taels of silver wasn't much, but 100,000 people added together was a lot. Moreover, it wasn't difficult to gather 100,000 soldiers with this idea. At the very least, it wouldn't cost 5 or 6 million taels of silver. To Celine, this wasn't a very good deal. Mo Shioyao laughed coldly and said, Announce this matter to the world. They have to agree even if they don't. If they don't agree, send them all to the north to farm. The north had been ruined beyond recognition by the northern tribes. It just so happened that they lacked people to farm. Leng Huai thought about it and couldn't help but laugh. As expected, Prince Ding was resourceful. This general obeys. Chapter 1037. The war was finally over. Although there was still a faint smell of blood in Feihong Pass after a fierce battle, there was a sense of serenity in the past. On the streets, at the city gates, there were no people coming in and out leisurely. The soldiers of the Mahist army silently cleaned up the battlefield and washed the bloodstains on the streets. Some of the bloodstains were from their comrades, some were from their enemies. Mixed together, no one could tell who had shed the blood, but both sides of the battle had paid a terrible price. In the morning, Yili took Qin Feng, Zhu Jing, and Wei Lin out of Feihong Pass and came to a hillside not far from Feihong Pass. When they arrived, there were already many people waiting there. Most of the people present were injured, and some were even seriously injured. Everyone had a solemn look on their faces. This was the place where more than 1,000 Qilin were buried. Seeing Yili arrive, the more than 100 Qilin immediately stood up straight and saluted in unison, Greetings to Wang Fei. Yili nodded solemnly and stood up. No need to be so polite. Many thanks to Wang Fei for personally coming to attend the funeral of our brothers. A middle-aged man with a face full of vicissitudes came forward and saluted Yili respectfully. This was the only surviving commander of the Qilin squad, who was stationed at Feihong Pass this time. Although Yili could not remember the names of all the Qilin team members, Yili knew most of the team leaders. Because most of these people were the first batch of Qilin team members who stood out. Many of their skills were even taught by Yili personally. Yili still remembered that this middle-aged man was called Li Yu. He had the same name as the elegant and knowledgeable Li Yu of Southern Tang, but he was a completely different person. Even when facing his own comrades, he was still very polite. This time, he took the initiative to come forward and talk to Yili. It was indeed not easy for him to take the initiative to talk to her. A bitter smile appeared on Yili's face. They were all taught by me, so how could I not come? I'm sorry. The usually silent man's eyes instantly turned red. He looked at Yili and choked out. No, it has nothing to do with Wang Fei. Since he was a soldier, it was a blessing to die on the battlefield. It's just that Yili looked around. Compared to the neat and extraordinary Qi Lin of the past, the more than 100 wounded soldiers now looked somewhat dispirited and sorrowful. Over 100 men who had never retreated in the face of thousands of soldiers and horses were now looking at the neat rows of tombs in front of them with red eyes. Lying inside were all their comrades who had gone through fire and water with them. Perhaps 2 days ago, they had gathered together to chat and laugh about their families, wives, children, and future. But now, they were separated by life and death. Yili sighed softly and walked to the front of the tomb, where there was a small open space. She respectfully bowed 3 times to the tombs and said in a deep voice, "Chancellor." Behind her, Qin Feng and Wei Lin took the wine jars and walked to the tombs in front of them. They sprinkled some wine in front of each grave. The Qilin soldiers at the side saw this and followed the 2 of them to sprinkle wine along each grave. The low whimpering sound of a zither came from the empty space in front of them. Everyone turned back and saw Yili sitting on the ground with a simple ebony zither on her knees. Yili's white fingers strummed, and the whimpering sound of the zither slowly flowed from her fingers. The sound of the zither was simple and unadorned, and the faint melody it played was even more desolate and sorrowful. This was the soul's summoning song. Yili's zither skills were not very good. There was not even a trace of sorrow on her face. However, the sound of the zither that flowed out from her fingers made everyone feel a faint sadness and regret. Yes, it was not sorrow, but regret. Regret that she could not do better. Regret that so many outstanding soldiers died in such a way. Suddenly, the sound of the zither changed and gradually became more intense. Every string seemed to be plucking at everyone's heart. It made everyone involuntarily think of the past. The pride and joy of just joining Qi Lin, the countless difficult training and the experience of going through life and death together, and the pride of going to the battlefield together. A man should know that the kindness of the country is great. Dying on the battlefield is a good ending. Someone shouted in a deep voice, "Brothers, farewell. Toast." Everyone raised the wine jars in their hands and faced the tombs in front of them and drank it in one gulp. In the sound of the zither, countless tears flowed down together with the wine, wetting the land under their feet where countless heroes slept. Brothers, go well, take care of yourselves. After the song ended, Yili stood up and casually placed the ebony zither on the ground beside her. Looking at the tearful soldiers in front of her, she said in a deep voice, "Liu." The middle-aged commander called Liu came forward and said respectfully, "This subordinate is here." Yili looked at him and said in a deep voice, "From now on, you're Qi Lin's deputy commander. This consort orders you to take Qi Lin back to recuperate. Once everyone's injuries are healed, immediately return to Glass City. Within a year, this consort wants to see a complete Qi Lin. Can you do it?" Liu could not help but be stunned. Meeting Yili's firm and clear eyes, he hurriedly said, "This subordinate accepts the order. This subordinate promises that within a year, I will give the consort a complete Qi Lin." Yili's order really gave Liu a shock. The importance and rank of Qi Lin's deputy commander was extremely extraordinary. Even the 3rd son of the Su family, who had joined Qi Lin for several years, was absolutely top-notch in terms of ability and ferocity on the battlefield. Moreover, he was Princess Ding's cousin. Even so, Su Qingfeng was just one of the 12 commanders of Qi Lin. At this time, the consort promoted him to deputy commander. As if reading Li Yu's mind, Yili said lightly, "Those who left are your brothers. This consort hopes that you can personally fill their positions again. This subordinate accepts the order," Li said loudly. This time, his tone was more excited. Yili nodded and said, "Everyone's injuries are not healed yet. Go back and rest early." "Yes, this subordinate will leave." Liu nodded in response. He turned around and led more than 100 Qi Lin soldiers back to Feihong Pass. "Consort, we should also go back," Zhuo Jing said softly. Yili shook her head and said, "I want to stay a little longer." Yili sat down on the ground again, placed the ebony zither on her lap, and played casually. There was no fixed tune, only intermittent playing. In this bleak, white graveyard, it made people feel even more sad. On a high ground not far from Qi Lin's graveyard, Imo Xiaoyao and Han Mingyue stood side by side. Looking sideways, they happened to see the calm face of the woman in plain clothes sitting on the white graveyard. Han Mingyue looked at Imo Xiaoyao, whose hair was as white as snow, and said, "Since you are worried, why don't you go and take a look?" Imo Xiaoyao glanced at him and said lightly, "I know what to do." Chapter 1038. Han Mingyue smiled faintly and did not speak. Now he could not help but envy Imo Xiaoyao for his good taste. Logically speaking, Imo Xiaoyao could not be blamed for this matter. But emotionally speaking, no matter who it was, they could not help but want to give him a slap in the face. But Yili had not said a single word of blame to Imo Xiaoyao. No matter whether she truly understood or tolerated Imo Xiaoyao, this was Imo Xiaoyao's great fortune. Similarly, it was probably because of this Yili that Imo Xiaoyao did not become more extreme. In these years, although she did not have much interaction with Imo Xiaoyao, Han Mingyue still paid attention to Imo Xiaoyao from time to time. After all, other than her only brother, Imo Xiaoyao could be considered the person Han Mingyue valued the most. In these years, Han Mingyue could vaguely sense that Imo Xiaoyao had lost control several times. But it seemed that every time Imo Xiaoyao was on the verge of losing control, he would steadily stabilize himself. Obviously, all of this had a lot to do with Yili. Just like last night, when Ling Huai mentioned the matter of the West Hill soldiers being held captive, Han Mingyue could clearly sense that Imo Xiaoyao had the intention to kill, but only took a moment for him to perfectly control it. Then he methodically instructed Ling Huai on how to deal with these captives. It was as if Prince Ding was really so compassionate and magnanimous. Heaven knew that Imo Xiaoyao was never someone who would treat his enemies kindly. And at that time, the only person present who could affect Imo Xiaoyao's emotions was Yili. So at that moment, Han Mingyue someone understood why Feng Zhiyao was so nervous about the relationship between Imo Xiaoyao and Yili. If Imo Xiaoyao was a peerless sword, then Yili was the scabbard. If Imo Xiaoyao was a peerless horse, then Yili was the bridle that could restrain the horse. Neither of the two could be missing. Han Mingyue lowered her head and laughed. "Xiaoyao, you're already past the age of being willful. Other people's tolerance is not for you to squander as you wish. At least, you should go to the Qi Lin soldiers' graves and toast a cup of wine. These people are all trained by Princess Ding herself. They're completely different from what you and I know. I always feel that Princess Consort's feelings towards these Qi Lin soldiers are not the same. This time, for your plan, you sacrificed half of the Qi Lin soldiers. If someone destroyed half of your Prince Ding mansion, would you be happy?" Imo Xiaoyao was silent for a long time. Suddenly, he said in a low voice, "I hate Qi Lin." Han Mingyue paused. After thinking for a moment, she couldn't help but laugh. "Do you hate Qi Lin? Or do you hate that Princess Consort treats other people or things differently? Princess Consort is different from other women. You should have known that a long time ago. Go, don't say that you hate Qi Lin. They're the most outstanding and admirable soldiers. Don't tell me that you don't feel regret." As Prince Ding, Imo Xiaoyao could be said to be one of a kind. He was destined to like all the elite soldiers. How could he not like Qi Lin, the elite of the elite soldiers? To be honest, Imo Xiaoyao still underestimated Qi Lin's fighting strength. He didn't even think that Yili would send Qi Lin to guard Fei Hong Pass. After all, compared to hundreds of thousands of soldiers, a troop of 1,000 people, no matter how elite, was still too small. Initially, Imo Xiaoyao was already prepared for the annihilation of the entire Fei Hong Pass. However, he did not expect that it was this group of people that he did not expect to save the entire Fei Hong Pass. After a long silence, Imo Xiaoyao walked in the direction of Yili. "Xiaoyao." Behind him, Han Mingyue suddenly called out. Imo Xiaoyao turned around. He looked at him and raised an eyebrow in confusion. Han Mingyue said, "We're still brothers, right?" Imo Xiaoyao nodded slightly. With a tap of his foot, he rushed in the direction of Yili. Looking at a certain person's figure hurriedly leaving, Han Mingyue couldn't help but chuckle. Who would have thought that Mo Xiaoyao, who was in the dreams of countless maidens back then, who was unrestrained and unrestrained, would be so anxious now? Thinking about himself, young Master Mingyu raised his eyes and looked into the distance. His elegant lips hooked up in a calm and relaxed smile. Mo Xiaoyao landed not far behind Yili like a light swan. He didn't make any noise. Qin Feng and the others looked at Mo Xiaoyao and silently retreated. Mo Xiaoyao looked at Yili sitting on the ground. He quietly walked over and sat on the ground like Yili. Xiaoyao? Yili stopped playing the zither and asked in confusion, "Didn't you say that Feng San and the others had something to discuss with you? Why are you here?" Mo Xiaoyao smiled faintly and said, "The war is over. No matter how big the matter is, it can be put aside for a while, right?" Yili smiled and nodded. Now, except for Murong Shun and Marquis Nan, who were still leading the Dechu State's army in the south to fight against the West Hill, the Mahist army was already quiet. Lowering her head and thinking, Yili said how to settle the families of the dead and seriously injured soldiers, and Mo Xiaoyao held her slightly cold hand and held it in his palm. He said, "You can leave these matters to young Master Qingxin. Don't worry, Li. I promise that every dead soldier's funeral will be arranged properly. The same goes for Qi Lin." Yili smiled and nodded. She was not worried about Qi Lin. Qi Lin had a very perfect system, including compensation for casualties and serious injuries. Moreover, Qi Lin did not have many people, so it was fine as long as they followed the rules. However, the other soldiers of the Mahist army often suffered thousands of casualties. It was not easy to deal with them properly. Seeing Yi Li's worry, Mo Xiaoyao promised firmly, "I will tell all the generals to take care of their soldiers' funerals." Hearing Mo Xiaoyao's solemn promise, Yili could not help but smile. She said, "Of course I believe you. You don't have to be so serious. I just said a few words casually." Mo Xiaoyao smiled faintly and did not say anything. Lily's heart was too soft, and she thought too much. However, Mo Xiaoyao knew that she was not thinking about the so-called kindness or the so-called noble character. She thought that this was how it should be. Yili had many ideas that were incompatible with the people of this era. For example, she thought that men should respect women. She thought that soldiers should protect the people. She thought that the country should take care of the soldiers' funerals. It was not that she thought that was wrong. It was just that for the people of this era, it was too absurd and difficult to do. However, perhaps it was because he loved Li, who was different from the rest. Mo Xiaoyao knew about her magical experiences. He even thought that Li's life in the previous world must be happier than in this world. That was why he wanted to give the world to her. He wanted to make her happier than before. Mo Xiaoyao took the ebony zither from Yi Li's hands and gently played it on his lap. Mo Xiaoyao's zither skills were actually better than Yi Li's. It was still the soul-summoning song. But in Mo Xiaoyao's hands, there was an even more impassioned and shocking feeling of vicissitudes. Yi Li listened to him play in a daze. Finally, she could not help but cry. Chapter 1039. After one song, Mo Xiaoyao let go of the ebony zither in his hand and reached out to pull her into his embrace. "Cry, Lily. I'm sorry, it's all my fault." Yili leaned into Mo Xiaoyao's embrace and finally cried out loud. Mo Xiaoyao gently patted her back, his half-closed eyes filled with tenderness and love. When the two returned to the general's residence, they were greeted by young Master Feng San, who was on the verge of going crazy. Seeing the two walking hand in hand, Feng Zhao didn't care about anything else and rushed over. He grabbed Mo Xiaoyao's collar and shouted, "Prince Ding, where did you run off to? Do you want the Prince Ding mansion or not? Are you going to deal with the documents in the study or not? More importantly, you were the one who told us to take care of things, but you ran off without a trace. What do you want?" Young Master Feng San was so angry that he couldn't care less about offending his superior. He roared at Mo Xiaoyao. Feng Zhao's sudden outburst really scared Yi Li and Mo Xiaoyao. Mo Xiaoyao quickly came back to his senses. He calmly pushed away Feng San's hand that was grabbing his collar and said, Feng San, if you have something to say it slowly. Feng Xiao sneered. Say it slowly? I want to say it slowly, but I have to be able to find the person first. We just finished the war, and there are so many things to take care of. So many of us put down what we were doing to listen to Prince Ding's instructions. In the end, we couldn't even find a shadow of a person. Hearing this, Yili couldn't help but feel a bit guilty. In the end, Mo Xiaoyao ran out so willfully to find her. She took a step forward and whispered to Feng Xiao, Feng San, today's matter. Feng Xiao raised his hand and said, Wang Fei, you don't have to speak for him. What's more, we don't dare to blame His Highness Prince Ding, do we? We're just complaining for no reason. Please punish us, Prince. It was no wonder that Feng Xiao wanted to get angry. The war had just stopped, and the busy ones did not know that the Feihong Pass was in a mess. This war had lasted for nearly a year, and everywhere outside the Feihong Pass was a mess. Everyone was busier than before the war ended. However, the busiest person was nowhere to be found. Not only was Mo Xiaoyao nowhere to be found, even Han Mingyue, who was usually able to help out, was nowhere to be found. Feng Xiao looked at the empty study room and the piles of files for a long time. Finally, he couldn't help but vent. Everyone present, other than Yi Li and Mo Xiaoyao, looked at Feng Xiao with admiration as if they were looking at a brave warrior. He dared to yell at Prince Ding in front of everyone. He really had a lot of guts. Mo Xiaoyao unexpectedly had a rare good temper. He smiled and said, All right, I know. Tomorrow morning, I promise to take care of everything. Feng Xiao raised an eyebrow. Tomorrow morning, do you have a problem? Mo Xiaoyao said. No. Feng Xiao quickly shook his head. As long as Prince Ding was willing to do it, the efficiency was very good. How could Feng Xiao have a problem? The group entered the study room and sat down. Feng Xiao took a breath before asking, Why did Prince summon us this morning? Just now, his anger rushed to his head. Now that he drank a cup of tea and calmed down, Feng Xiao also felt that he was a little impulsive. He was polite to Mo Xiaoyao when he asked. Mo Xiaoyao pulled Yi Li to sit down and said with a smile, It's nothing. I just want to talk about how to deal with the casualties. Speaking of this, Feng Xiao's expression also became serious. He took out a file from the pile of files beside him and said in a low voice, After nearly a year of fighting, the specific numbers haven't been calculated. But this time, there are casualties in Feihong Pass. Including Qi Lin, there were a total of 237,600 soldiers stationed at Feihong Pass. Only 13,127 of them survived. Among them, 19 of them were captains and above, and 7 of them were deputy generals. With such heavy casualties, even Mo Xiaoyao was speechless for a long time. For so many years, besides the tragedy of the Maoist army in Huifeng Valley more than a decade ago, this was the first time there was such a heavy casualty rate. And these soldiers stationed at Feihong Pass were the elite soldiers of the Maoist army. They were not the soldiers of the Chu state that Mo Xiaoyao had just taken in. Just one battle was so tragic, not to mention the casualties in the past half a year. With a rough estimate, the casualties of the Maoist army since the siege of Chu capital was broken up until now was at least 600,000 to 700,000 Maoist army elite soldiers. The Maoist army that originally had less than 1 million elite soldiers now had less than 20 to 30% left. The rest were the remnants of the Chu state soldiers that had been taken in before. This time, Mo Xiaoyao had taken in hundreds of thousands of Chu army soldiers, as well as the new recruits that had just entered the camp not long ago. This battle could not be considered a loss for both sides, but all sides that participated in the battle had paid a huge price. No wonder Mo Xiaoyao did not plan to continue attacking the Chu state in Xiling. Looking at the shocking numbers in front of them, the three could not help but be silent. The atmosphere also became more solemn. Mo Xiaoyao thought for a while and said, Feng San, have people passed down Ai's orders? All the soldiers that died in battle must be given out without exception. and the wounded soldiers must be properly settled. If there are any problems, have them come directly to I. Feng Jiao hesitated for a moment, but still nodded. To settle so many dead soldiers and wounded soldiers was undoubtedly a huge project for the Prince Ding mansion. But this was what they should do, and the only thing they could do. Let the dead rest in peace. Yili said, all the silver from the exchange of prisoners from Xiling could be used on this. If it is not enough, you can ask Han Mingxi for more. Just let me know when you come back. Feng Jiao hurriedly thanked Yili, and Mo Xiuyao thought for a while, then raised his eyebrows and said, Li, do not worry. We will have other sources of income very soon. Other sources of income? Yili raised her eyebrows, and Mo Xiuyao smiled coldly and said, of course. There's also the reparations from the northern tribes, Xiling, and the Chu state. A battle was not so easy to win. If they won, they might not be able to rest easy. But if they lost, they would be in big trouble. Since ancient times, the loser either had to pay tribute or cede territory to pay reparations. This was a common practice, and Mo Xiuyao had no interest in paying tribute. Since it was not sincere, there was no need to put on an act. But reparations were necessary. Hearing this, Feng Jiao could not help but clap his hands and laugh. Prince is right. I forgot about this matter. Chapter 1040. In city, the Emperor of Xiling City ever since the imperial city in the north of Xiling was forced to be given to Mo Xiuyao, the Emperor of Xiling had moved his capital to City. Fortunately, the Murong family had been running in City for hundreds of years. Although it was not as majestic as the Emperor of Xiling City, it was still one of the most prosperous cities in Xiling. After 2 years of major renovation by the Emperor of Xiling, it barely lived up to the name of the imperial city. Speaking of which, it was no wonder that all the powers in the world did not like Mo Xiuyao. Not to mention the northern tribes. In the royal house of the northern tribes, other than the king of the northern tribes who lived in a small stone city, the other nobles still lived in tents. The two powerful countries, Xiling and the Chu state, had lost their imperial cities one after another. The Chu state had to settle in Nanjing, while Xiling had moved to City. Prince Ding, who held 2 imperial cities at the same time, did not care about whether he was going to ascend to the throne or not. It was no wonder that others were envious of him. In the Jinan Palace of City, late Tungfeng sat on the seat of honor, looking at the empty hall below in a daze. He had once wanted to ascend to this position. He had been proud of Jinan Palace since he was young. In his heart, the position of Jinan of Gojoseon was much more noble than the hypocritical position of the emperor. After all, his father was much more powerful than the emperor who only knew how to eat, drink, and play in the palace. Therefore, his dream was to gain his father's approval and become the ruler of Jinan Palace. But when he really sat on this position, he only felt desolation and coldness. Prince, what should we do next? In the hall, there were 3 generals and a few men who looked like civil servants. One of them asked worriedly. In fact, these people's worries could not compare to Lei Tingfeng's. They had rushed all the way back to West Hill, so the news from Feihong Pass had not reached them in time. However, Lei Tingfeng knew in his heart that his father was already gone. Lei Tingfeng's heart trembled, and he felt a chill run down his spine after losing Genom of Gojoseon's Jinan Palace. After a long time, Lei Tingfeng opened his eyes and calmly looked at everyone present. Lei Tingfeng raised his hand, and a golden token appeared in his hand. On the token was a golden 4-clawed golden dragon with the word South Town engraved in the middle. Other than the 3 generals, everyone else turned pale with fright. This was the most important token in Jinan Palace. It represented the status and authority of Genom of Gojoseon. Seeing the token was like seeing Genom of Gojoseon. Greetings, Prince. As soon as they saw the token, the more knowledgeable people's expressions changed. They knew that things were not good. It was already strange that the crown prince, who had been away on an expedition, suddenly returned. Now, he appeared with the token that represented the authority of Jinan Palace, which the prince would not give to anyone. How could they not feel uneasy? Everyone, please rise. Lei Tengfeng said in a deep voice, "Father has ordered that from now on, everything in the Jinan Duke's residence will be under my command." Everyone looked at each other in dismay, but they were somewhat hesitant. If it were Jinnum of Gojoseon, everyone would naturally follow Jinnum of Gojoseon. After all, compared to the incompetent Emperor of Shieling, anyone with a discerning eye could see that Jinnum of Gojoseon was much stronger. However, if it were the Crown Prince of Jinnum of Gojoseon, it would be different. It was not that Lei Tengfeng was not good, but Lei Tengfeng was too young. Compared to Lei Jinting's reputation, Lei Tengfeng's reputation was much worse. "We will only follow the prince's orders." The three generals bowed in unison. Lei Tengfeng finally understood why his father had specially chosen these three generals to follow him back. Naturally, there were more powerful and outstanding generals in the army. However, those people were all veterans who had followed his father for many years. Their military achievements were outstanding, and he could not suppress them. Those who had power behind them were afraid that they would be disloyal. However, these three people were all promoted from ordinary soldiers by his father. Moreover, they had followed Lei Tengfeng in the past and had a good personal relationship with him. Naturally, there was no need to worry about them being disloyal in the short term. "Official Wu, what do you say?" Lei Tengfeng nodded and swept his gaze over the person who was still hesitating. Official Wu looked at Lei Tengfeng and respectfully said, "I wonder, what plans does the Crown Prince have?" Lei Tengfeng's eyes darkened. He stared at the people in front of him, and suddenly, a faint smile appeared on his lips. "I plan to try out the chair in Yangon Palace. What do you think?" Official Wu's expression changed slightly. He smiled and said, "Crown Prince, isn't this a little too hasty?" Lei Tengfeng was about to speak when a guard outside the door reported, "Reporting to the Crown Prince, the Emperor has summoned you." Lei Tengfeng snorted and said, "I know. You can leave first." Lei Tengfeng stood up and walked down from his seat. The people below hurriedly advised, "Crown Prince, the Emperor rashly summoned you at this time. I'm afraid he doesn't have good intentions. Crown Prince, please be careful." Lei Tengfeng smiled faintly and said, "I suddenly returned to the capital. It would be strange if he didn't summon me. Besides, some things should be done sooner rather than later." Casually walking in front of Official Wu, Lei Tengfeng said with a smile, "Official Wu, don't you think so?" Official Wu's face immediately turned pale, and cold sweat quietly flowed down his forehead. "See, Crown Prince." Lei Tengfeng snorted and a cold light flashed. Everyone only heard the sound of a sword being sheathed. Lei Tengfeng had already walked out of the hall. Everyone lowered their heads and saw Official Wu lying on the ground with his eyes wide open. A trace of blood slowly blossomed on his neck. "This subject swears to be loyal to the Crown Prince." Lei Tengfeng turned his head and said faintly, "Everyone, there is no need to be nervous. Everyone is Imperial Father's trusted aide. As for Official Wu, Imperial Father has already said that he is not one of Imperial Father's people. The things are all here. Everyone can take a look." Lei Tengfeng took out a booklet and placed it on the table. He didn't look at everyone's reaction and walked out. Lei Tengfeng walked quickly in the Imperial Palace. Although it was called an Imperial Palace, it was more accurate to say that it was a converted mansion. After all, an Imperial Palace couldn't be built in a short period of time. Crown Prince Jinnum of Gojoseon, Prince Rue, Lei Tengfeng requests an audience with the Emperor. Lei Jinting said in a clear voice as he walked to the entrance of a gorgeous Imperial Palace. The music in the Imperial Palace quickly stopped. After a while, an attendant came out and cautiously said, "Prince Rui, the Emperor summons you in." Lei Tengfeng nodded and was about to walk in when he was blocked by the eunuch. The eunuch smiled and pointed at the Imperial bodyguards and several people who looked like generals behind him. He said, "Prince, isn't this a bit inappropriate?" Lei Tengfeng raised his eyebrows and said, "I brought the three generals back to the capital to report on their work. What's wrong with that?" The eunuch had a bitter face and was in a dilemma. He naturally knew that bringing the generals back to the capital to report on their work would require an audience with the Emperor. However, The emperor also ordered that only Lei Tingfeng was allowed to enter. Lei Tingfeng said in a low voice, "You don't have to worry. If the emperor blames me, I will take responsibility." The eunuch didn't dare to insist on stopping Lei Tingfeng, even though he was so domineering. After all, the people of Jinnan Palace had always been rude in the imperial palace. Not to mention the servants. Even the emperor had long been used to it. Chapter 1041. When Lei Tingfeng walked into the main hall, he was greeted by the dizzying smell of alcohol and the fragrance of cosmetics. Even though outsiders might not know the inside story, Lei Tingfeng's eyes couldn't help but flash with a trace of coldness when he saw this scene when his father died in battle. "Lei Tingfeng greets your majesty." Lei Tingfeng bowed his head in salute. The three generals behind him also saluted. Generals Feng Li, Zhang Yi, and Shangwan Qing greet your majesty. The emperor of Xiling looked down with drunken eyes and said with a smile, "It's Tingfeng. Come and sit down." Lei Tingfeng stood up and walked to the front of the right and sat down. He said, "Tingfeng thanks Imperial Uncle." The emperor of Xiling was thinner than 2 years ago when he was in the emperor of Xiling city. Years of alcohol and women had corroded his body, and his smiling eyes were muddy and lifeless. However, at this moment, when this pair of eyes looked at Lei Tingfeng, it was filled with meaning. "Tingfeng, aren't you following your father to attack the Mo family army? Why did you come back?" Lei Tingfeng said, "Imperial Uncle, Imperial Father received news that Southern Shu has abandoned their alliance with our country and has switched sides to the Prince Ding Mansion. Murongshen and Marquis Nand of the Prince Ding Mansion are personally leading the 300,000 Southern Shu army across the Yunnan River to invade our Xiling. Imperial Father specially ordered Tingfeng to come back and deal with this matter." "Oh." The Emperor of Xiling looked at Lei Tingfeng with some surprise. "Is there such a thing?" Tingfeng's words are absolutely true. If Imperial Uncle can't handle it, you can send someone to investigate. I'm afraid that the battle has already started at the Yunnan River. The Emperor of Xiling nodded and said, "If so, what is Tingfeng's plan?" Lei Tingfeng looked up at the Emperor of Xiling and said, "Tingfeng plans to send Shangwan Qing and Feng Li to lead 500,000 soldiers to fight Murongshen and Marquis Nan." 500,000? The Emperor of Xiling looked at Lei Tingfeng and asked, "Where do we have so many soldiers?" Lei Zhenting had taken most of the elite soldiers of Xiling with him when he went to fight the Mahist army. Moreover, there were many soldiers stationed at the Yunnan River. It was no wonder that the Xiling Emperor was worried when he brought so many troops out of Xiling. Tingfeng looked down and said, Imperial Uncle, what do you think we should do?" The Emperor of Xiling was speechless. He had been suppressed by Lei Zhenting all his life and had never been involved in military, political, and civil affairs. Even a genius would be exhausted one day if he continued like this, not to mention that he was not a genius. To be able to fight against Lei Tingfeng in the open and in the dark for so many years, it was all because of his honorable identity as the emperor and his innate proficiency in scheming and scheming. However, it was obviously not feasible to use it in a war. The Emperor of Xiling had been thinking about how to take back the power that belonged to him all his life, but he had never thought about how to be a good emperor after taking back the power. Lei Tingfeng hid the disdain in his eyes and said coldly, "Murongshen and Marquis Nan are experienced generals. Father is not here now. If we don't send an army to stop them, I'm afraid that the Mahist army will come again, right in front of us." The Emperor of Xiling frowned and sighed. He habitually reached out to take the wine glass on the table and waved at Lei Tingfeng impatiently, saying, "Fine, you go. We'll do as you say." Lei Tingfeng had just breathed a sigh of relief, when suddenly a person who looked like a eunuch hurried in from outside and whispered a few words in the Emperor of Xiling's ear. The Emperor of Xiling's expression changed and looked at Lei Tingfeng with probing eyes. He waved his hand to let the eunuch leave. The Emperor of Xiling frowned and thought for a while. He asked, "Tingfeng, you haven't told me yet. How is the battle between our army and the Prince Ding Mansion going?" Lei Tingfeng said indifferently, "Your Majesty is right. I'm going to report to you." The Emperor of Shilin nodded his head in satisfaction, saying, "That's good. I'm also a bit worried. Don't deceive me. Deceiving the Emperor is a capital offense." Lei Tingfeng frowned coldly and said in a deep voice, "Tongfeng doesn't dare. Reporting to your majesty, I'm afraid that our army won't be able to defeat the Mahist army. We'll definitely lose." "What?" The Emperor of Shilin was shocked. Although he was useless, he had no enmity with his country. Originally, when he heard the servant report about Lei Jinting's defeat, he was gloating. However, when he heard Lei Tingfeng say that they'll definitely lose, he couldn't help but be shocked. He really didn't want to experience the feeling of the Mahist army invading the imperial city again. Furthermore, they moved from the north to City last time. If Mo Xiaoyao invades the city again, where can they go? For the first time in his life, the Emperor of Shilin realized that it might not be a good thing for the Western Tomb to be without Lei Jinting. "Tongfeng, your father," Lei Tingfeng didn't hide it and said in a deep voice, "That's right. If I'm not wrong, my father has died for the country." Hearing this, the Emperor of Shilin couldn't help but be stunned. He had lived in fear for his entire life under Lei Jinting's pressure, although there wasn't a moment when he didn't think about how to kill Lei Jinting. However, when he heard the news of Lei Jinting's death, his first reaction wasn't happiness, but helplessness. "Now, what should we do?" the Emperor of Shilin asked. Lei Tingfeng looked down and said indifferently, "These 3 generals are the talents that my father left for the Western Tomb. Tongfeng plans to send 2 of them to lead the army to attack Murongshun and Marquis Nan. If Mo Xiaoyao personally leads the army to attack the Western Tomb, Tongfeng is willing to live and die with the Western Tomb." There was no other way now. The Emperor of Shilin didn't beat around the bush and nodded. "All right, I'll now confer you as the new Genom of Gojoseon. You'll guard the Great Tomb in place of my brother. In addition, General Feng, General Zhang, and General Shangwan, I'll confer them as the Protector General of the State, the General of the State, and the General of the State." With one sentence from the Emperor of Shilin, the 3 generals who were originally deputy generals immediately became first-ranked generals of the Western Tomb. "Thank you, Your Majesty." Lei Tingfeng bowed his head. "Thank you, Your Majesty, for your grace." After Lei Tongfeng left the hall, the magnificent palace regained its tranquility. A man who looked like a eunuch walked out from the back and carefully looked at the Emperor of Shilin, who was sitting on the dragon throne with his eyes closed. He whispered, "Your Majesty, why are you not?" They had already made arrangements. As long as Lei Tingfeng came, they could capture him. Without Lei Jinting, Lei Tingfeng was still young, even though he was powerful. However, if he was given a few more years to mature, things would be different. However, they didn't hear the Emperor of Shilin's signal. The men of sacrifice lying in ambush could only watch Lei Tingfeng walk out. The Emperor of Shilin waved his hand and said, "Lei Jinting is already dead. If we kill Lei Tingfeng, what will happen to Ling?" Over the years, his only remaining children had either died or married off. In this huge palace, other than those concubines who only knew how to flatter him, he was the only one left. It could be said that he was truly alone. Now, even his lifelong enemy was dead, but Ling was still here. He had to leave something for Ling. "Forget it, go. Pass down my order." Lei Tongfeng is conferred the title of Genom of Gojoseon. The previous Genom of Gojoseon, Lei Jinting, has died for the country and will be conferred the title of Martyr of Loyalty. In addition, I am not feeling well. Genom of Gojoseon will be the regent for the time being. The Chamberlain was stunned. Obviously, he didn't understand why the Emperor changed his mind in such a short time. However, he had to obey the Emperor of Shiling's order. This servant obeys. This servant will take his leave. It seemed that the Jinan Palace would have the final say in the future of Shiling. Lei Tingfeng left the palace. Although he had obtained the full command of the Shiling army as he wished, his face was still gloomy. Just now, he really wanted to kill the Emperor of Shiling. He also knew that the Emperor of Shiling had placed men of sacrifice in the palace. However, He didn't expect that the incompetent Emperor of Shieling would suddenly make such a decision at that time. After a moment of hesitation, he had already lost his killing intent. Lei Tingfeng couldn't help but smile bitterly. Compared to his father, he was still far behind. Lei Tingfeng, who is it? Suddenly, a low voice faintly traveled into his ears. Lei Tingfeng's expression changed, and he immediately looked in the direction of the voice. Just a few steps away, a middle-aged man in blue clothes walked over and looked at him with an indifferent expression. Ling Taian. Lei Tingfeng gritted his teeth and said. The voice he had just heard clearly came from far away, but Ling Taian had silently appeared in front of him. It had only been a short time since they last met, but Ling Taian's martial arts cultivation had reached a new level. Ling Taian nodded and raised his hand to throw something at Lei Tingfeng. Lei Tingfeng reflexively wanted to dodge, but he suddenly thought of something and reached out to grab the item that Ling Taian had thrown at him. It was a very ordinary jar made of white porcelain. Although it was wrapped in a layer of cloth, Lei Tingfeng could feel what was inside as soon as he touched it. At the same time, he guessed why Ling Taian had thrown this to him. This is... Lei Tingfeng tightly grasped the item in his hand as he stared at Ling Taian. Ling Taihan indifferently said, "These are Lei Jinting's ashes. You burned my father." Lei Tingfeng felt a wave of anger rush to his head as he glared hatefully at the man in front of him. Ling Taian nonchalantly glanced at him and sneered, "You should be glad that Mo Xiaoyao allowed me to burn Lei Jinting and bring him back." Lei Tingfeng was silent. Of course, he knew how many people treated enemy generals who had been killed, especially when the person's status was very high. But at least he had preserved the last bit of dignity as Zhennan King of Gojoseon. Zhennan Palace will remember this, Lei Tingfeng said seriously. Ling Taihan's lips curled into a mocking smile. He didn't look at Lei Tingfeng again as he turned and left in a huff. On the street outside Zhennan Wang's residence, Lei Tingfeng held the bone ashes in his hands and was lost in thought. "Father, this child will definitely live up to your expectations." Chapter 1042. After the battle at Feihong Pass was settled, Mo Xiaoyao and Yi Li set off for Glass City. Conquering the world depended on military might, but governing the world did not depend on military might. Even with young Master Qinshun overseeing the city, there were still many matters in Glass City that required Mo Xiaoyao's personal attention. Counting from the time they left Glass City for the northern region last year, it had been a full 10 months since they left Glass City. 10 months seemed long, but pacifying the northern region, expelling the northern tribes, defeating southern Shu and Shieling, all these things had happened in an astonishingly short amount of time. With so many military achievements, no matter who it was, it would be enough to last 3 lifetimes. But Mo Xiaoyao and Yi Li had only used 10 months. When everyone came back to their senses and looked back on these incomparably valiant military achievements, they could only sigh in amazement. 10 months seemed short, but it was also very long. It was long enough for 2 children who had just turned a month old and did not even know how to turn over, to sit in the arms of an adult and look around curiously, learning to speak. When Yi Li saw the 2 babies in the arms of the 2 Su madams, she finally could not help but cry again. The 2 babies had just turned a month old when they had been placed in the care of the Su family. For almost a year, they had not even seen their parents. How could Yi Li not feel guilty? Fortunately, although it could be said that they had barely seen their parents, the 2 children were not shy with strangers. With a smile, First Madam Su placed the baby dressed in a small white brocade jacket with white fox fur in Yi Li's arms. She smiled and teased. "Linner, say mother, say mother." The baby opened his large black eyes and looked curiously at Yi Li. He only felt that the hug was soft and fragrant, with a very comfortable fragrance. It was different from the hug of his aunt and uncle who usually loved to hug him, but he liked it very much. The baby smiled widely at Yi Li and followed First Madam Su's call. "Mother, mother, Lena knows how to call people?" Yi Li exclaimed in surprise. She raised her head to look at the other baby in the arms of Madam Su, who was wearing a pink robe. Second Madam Su smiled and said, These two children are as smart as Xiaobao. Xin call me mother. Little Xin giggled at Yili, her sweet little face full of affection. It was obvious that she wasn't shy with strangers at all. She even reached out her small hands towards Yili and called out, "Nyang nyang, hug hug." Yili only felt her heart soften, as if something was slightly heating up. She carefully pulled little Xin into her arms. Fortunately, the two children were almost 1 year old, so they could sit comfortably in Yili's arms. The two babies grew up together and had a good relationship. Not only did they not fight to be hugged, they even held each other's hands in Yili's arms and babbled to each other in words that no one else could understand. Mo Xiuyao stood behind Yili, reaching out to support the baby in her arms from time to time. A faint smile appeared on his lips, washing away the killing intent that had just come from the battlefield. Mo Xiaobao stood by Yili's side and looked regretfully at the two babies in Yili's arms. He had already grown up and couldn't let his mother hug him anymore. At least, he couldn't let his younger brother and sister hug his mother. "Mother, Xiaobao missed you too." Mo Xiaobao looked at Yili with eager eyes. Yili smiled and said, "Mother missed you too. Did you listen to eldest uncle these days?" Thinking back to when Mo Xiaobao was sent back to Li City a few days ago, Mo Xiaobao's aggrieved look before leaving, Yili felt a wave of guilt in her heart. Although it was for his safety, Mo Xiaobao was an extremely smart child. At that time, even if no one told him, he definitely understood that the situation was very bad, so he didn't say anything and left with the guards. He must have been very worried these days. Mo Xiaobao nodded repeatedly. Xiaobao is the most obedient. If you don't believe me, mother, you can ask eldest uncle. Mo Xiaobao grew more naughty as he grew older, but he was smart. If someone didn't have any ability, even if they were pranked by him, they wouldn't be able to find any evidence. In the entire Li City, only Su Qingshan could control him. "You're obedient?" Who was the one who made a fuss about going to Feihong Pass yesterday? Outside the door, Su Qingshan's voice carried a faint smile. Soon, the immortal young master dressed in snow-white clothes appeared in front of everyone. There was a kind of person who was born to be favored by the heavens. Even time seemed to have frozen on his body. If Mo Xiuyao's unchanging handsomeness for so many years was because of his profound skills, then Su Qingshan was born to be favored by the heavens. Su Qingshan's youth didn't make people feel that he was immature. That handsome and otherworldly appearance and temperament made him seem as if he had the handsomeness of a youth and the steadiness of a middle-aged man. But it was different from the steadiness of a court official who worked hard all year round. There was another kind of carefreeness. Su Qingshan stepped into the hall and said with a smile, "In less than a year, you defeated 4 countries in a row. Such an unprecedented record. Congratulations to Prince." Mo Xiuyao smiled and said, "No, if it weren't for Brother Qingshan overseeing Li City, how could I be so relieved? Not to mention conquering the world." These words weren't empty words. As the saying goes, before the troops and horses move, the provisions must be prepared first. The importance of military supplies to a war was self-evident. In the past year, it was because of the Su family overseeing the Northwest that the Mahist army never had to worry about military supplies and provisions. With this kind of logistical support, it was naturally much easier to win a war. Su Qingshan smiled faintly and wasn't modest at all. They were both smart people and could naturally tell which words were true and which were false. Moreover, with Yili's relationship with the Su family, it would be hypocritical and alienating if she continued to refuse to be modest like an outsider. Su Qingshan sat down. The two Sus knew that they were going to talk business and got up to leave. Yili had just returned and naturally couldn't bear to part with the two children, so the two children also stayed. The two babies sat in Yili's arms. Seeing the two grandmothers who had been taking care of them leave, they weren't in a hurry. This caused the second Su's wife to laugh and scold the two little ones for being heartless. Mo Xiuyao took the cute little Xin from Yili's arms and sat down next to Yili. She was wearing a pink brocade dress and a silver ankle bracelet. After leaving her mother's arms, Little Exa didn't cry because she also liked this white person very much. She curiously grabbed Imo Xiaoyao's long white hair and gently tugged on it. Imo Xiaoyao helplessly looked at his daughter. He raised his hand and took out a delicately carved jade bead the size of a pigeon's egg and stuffed it into her hand to play with. Exung didn't dislike it and curiously played with the jade bead in her hand. Imo Xiaobao looked at his little brother in his mother's arms and his little sister in his father's arms. He pitifully moved to Su Qingchen's side. Su Qingchen smiled and shook her head. She pointed to the seat next to her. Imo Xiaobao then went to the seat next to Su Qingchen and sat down. The hall was quiet for a moment before Su Qingchen said, "Originally, you just came back and I shouldn't disturb you. However, there's something that I want the prince to see for himself." Su Qingchen took out a letter from her sleeve. Yili only needed a glance to know what it was. The bright yellow envelope had a drawing of a giant wolf baring its fangs and brandishing its claws. This was the letter of credence of the northern tribes. Chapter 1043. What's the matter with the northern tribes? Yili asked with a frown. Yili never had a good impression of the northern tribes, even if they had some form of cooperation with the crown prince of the northern tribes. Imo Xiaoyao held his daughter with one hand and used the other to take the letter. He frowned and said, "Use Princess Ronghua to exchange for the bodies of Yelu Yi and the northern tribe soldiers?" Imo Xiaoyao was silent for a while before he looked up at Yi Li with some annoyance. "Where are Yelu Ye's remains?" Yi Li was speechless. She really did not remember where Yelu Ye's remains were. She was too busy at that time, and cleaning up the battlefield was not her responsibility. How could she remember such a thing? Imo Xiaoyao said with some dissatisfaction, "Since they want to exchange for Yelu Ye's remains, why did they only come now? It had been so long. Who knew where they had hidden Yelu Ye's remains?" Su Qingchen could not help but twitch his lips and said, "The northern tribes are frozen in winter. It's just the beginning of spring, and their envoys have already arrived in Li City. It's quite fast. Moreover, the northern tribes would definitely observe the situation. If the Maoist army lost to the Western Hill and to Chu State's allied forces, who would exchange with you? They would just send their army over to attack again." Imo Xiaoyao nodded impatiently and said, "Fine, I understand. Tell them that they can exchange for Yelu Yi and the northern tribe soldiers. But Princess Ronghua is not enough. What else do you want?" Su Qingchen raised his eyebrows. Imo Xiaoyao smiled and said, "That will depend on what young Master Qingchen can get them to take out. The more the better." The Prince Ding mansion was rich, but it could not withstand too many people, which place did not need money. Su Qingchen nodded and said, "I understand. But can you find Yelu Ye's remains?" With Imo Xiaoyao's personality, he didn't need to think to know that Yelu Ye's final outcome would not be a peaceful burial. Imo Xiaoyao looked at Su Qingchen as if she was an idiot. Were Yelu Ye's ashes made of gold or carved with words? This was the first time in his life that someone had questioned his intelligence. However, young Master Chun admitted defeat. "So, are you going to use some random ash to fool me? Do you really intend to exchange Princess Ronghua back?" Su Qingchen looked at Imo Xiaoyao suspiciously. In her impression, Imo Xiaoyao was not a kind person, unless there was something to gain from it. However, young Master Qingchen could not think of any other benefits that Imo Xiaoyao could obtain from the northern tribes. Land was out of the question. Even if the northern tribes were willing to give it to them, they would only be left with boundless grasslands. Not many commoners were willing to stay there. For at least 8 months a year, they would have to endure the northern tribes' raids. Now that the Central Plains people had not even been dealt with, Imo Xiaoyao would definitely not extend his hand to them at this time. Other than that, there seemed to be nothing that Imo Xiaoyao would be interested in. Imo Xiaoyao nodded. Of course. Didn't the northern tribes say that Princess Ronghua was Li's sworn sister? If Princess Ding's sworn sister was harmed by the northern tribes, wouldn't the Prince Ding mansion be the one to lose face? We all know that's not true. Su Qingchen raised her eyebrows. The relationship between Yili and Princess Ronghua was not bad, but it was not to the point of becoming sworn sisters. Mo Xiaoyao waved his hand. It doesn't matter. By the way, it's best to tell the northern tribes that I'm interested in their war horses. What if they don't agree? The war horses of the Central Plains were not as good as the northern tribes or even the western regions. Even if there were foreign war horses, they would not be as good as before. The northern tribes and the Central Plains had been enemies for generations, and war horses were strictly prohibited from entering the Central Plains through any channels. Although over the years, the Princeton Mansion had secretly obtained some from various channels, the amount was pitifully small. It was no wonder that Mo Xiaoyao was so generous this time. Don't agree? Mo Xiaoyao sneered. Then I will go and get it myself. I understand. Su Qingqian nodded, indicating that she understood Mo Xiaoyao's determination. With Su Qingqian's statement, Mo Xiaoyao's expression immediately eased, and he put this matter aside. Since young Master Qingqian was willing to express his opinion, it meant that there was no problem. After talking about the northern tribes, Su Qingqian looked at Mo Xiaoyao and raised her eyebrows. Also, these days, someone has been asking me about something, but I don't know how to answer, so I'll ask the prince for his opinion. What could possibly be a problem for young Master Qingqian? Mo Xiaoyao asked disapprovingly. Obviously, he thought that Su Qingqian was bored and wanted to find trouble with him. Su Qingqian played with the porcelain teacup in her hand, her handsome eyes staring at Mo Xiaoyao. A long time ago, someone asked me about Prince's plan to ascend to the throne. Ascend to the throne? Mo Xiaoyao's hand, which was holding Exine Er's hand, paused. He frowned and said, "Who said that I plan to ascend to the throne?" Su Qingqian raised her eyebrows. No one said it, but obviously there are people who think so. Does that include young Master Qingqian? Mo Xiaoyao asked. Su Qingqian smiled, but did not speak. The answer was obvious. I don't plan to ascend to the throne. Mo Xiaoyao said seriously. If he wanted to be emperor, he would have done it long ago. Why drag it out for so many years? Su Qingqian sighed softly and frowned slightly. You should know the pros and cons of this. Young Master Qingqian looked at it purely from the point of view of ruling the world. Mo Xiaoyao was not lacking in anything, so it was inevitable that he would rule the world. But as long as he did not ascend to the throne, he would lack that name. This did not prevent Mo Xiaoyao from controlling the Prince Ding Mansion and even all the territory that the Prince Ding Mansion currently occupied, but still made people feel uneasy. Moreover, because it was not an official imperial court, the ranks of the officials under the Prince Ding Mansion were also disorderly. After so many years, young Master Qingqian was surprised that he did not make any mistakes in the chaos. Prince Ding, even if you have no intention of ascending to the throne, you should consider the feelings of those who follow you. So many people were loyal to the Prince Ding Mansion because of loyalty, but it was definitely not just for loyalty. Although young Master Qingqian did not care about fame and power, he did not look down on those who valued power and worked hard for fame and fortune. Cultivate civil and martial arts skills and sell them to the imperial family. This was a deep-rooted concept in the hearts of the people for thousands of years. In the eyes of the people, only the imperial family was orthodox. Only by submitting to the imperial family was one's true birth. The Prince Ding Mansion today was no longer the Prince Ding Mansion of the past. Now, the Prince Ding Mansion had not only the generals who had been loyal to the Prince Ding Mansion for generations, but also more people and families who came to seek refuge. What? Young Master Qingqian also has this intention? How about I appoint you as the Prime Minister? Mo Xiaoyao looked at Su Qingqian with a smile. Su Qingqian lifted his eyes lightly. Thank you, but I can't accept it. Mo Xiaoyao raised his eyebrows and gave him a slightly complacent look. So if I ascended to the throne and appointed all the officials, everything would be on track. Wouldn't the Su family immediately resign and live in seclusion? Did they think I was a fool? Young Master Qingqian was equivalent to half of the people in the imperial court, not to mention the whole Su family. Chapter 1044. More importantly, what was the point of ascending the throne? When he became the emperor, he would go to court every morning and listen to the ministers quarreling over trivial matters. If he didn't go to court for a day, his ears would go numb from the censors. How good was it now? If there was something, he could deal with it. If there was nothing, he could do whatever he wanted. It wasn't as if he had to go to court every day as a prince, right? If Su Qingshun didn't understand what Mo Xiaoyao was thinking, then he would have lived for nothing. He ignored him and looked at Yi Li with a smile. What does Yi Li think? Yi Li teased the baby as she said with a smile, "Big brother can just ask Xiaoyao about this kind of thing." Mo Xiaoyao looked proudly at Su Qingshun and said, "Yi Li and I are husband and wife." Naturally, the husband sings the wife's tune. However, if Yi Li wants to be the empress, I don't mind ascending the throne. Yi Li frowned slightly. Of course she knew that Su Qingshun was saying this for their own good. After all, even if Su Qingshun didn't say it, someone else would soon bring it up. However, it wasn't that Yi Li hadn't thought about being the empress, but she really wasn't that enthusiastic. With her current situation, being the empress wouldn't be better for her. Instead, there would be more restrictions on her. These restrictions weren't given to her by Mo Xiaoyao or anyone else, but the restrictions of this generation. There's no need to think about it. I have already decided. Seeing Yi Li frown, Mo Xiaoyao directly decided, "Yi Li, can we not be the empress? In the future, Mo Xiaobao can make you the empress dowager." Su Qingshun raised an eyebrow. Mo Xiaoyao saying this clearly indicated that the next successor of the Prince Ding mansion and even the future master of the world was definitely Mo Xiaobao. Looking at the two parties involved, Su Qingshun sighed softly and said, "Forget it. It's good that you know what you're doing. No matter what, Li Er, the Su family will always support you." Yi Li gently nodded and said with a smile, "Big brother, I know." She knew that the Su family had always stood behind her and supported her. Without the Su family, no matter how capable she was, it would be difficult for her to make so many people in the Prince Ding mansion submit to her. She was born in the Su family, which was a noble family, and the Su family's grandfather, uncle, and cousin, who were regarded as incomparably powerful by the world, had always been her strongest backing. Su Qingshun stood up and said to the two of them, "Even if we don't consider the matter of ascending the throne, Lin and Exen were about to turn a year old. I'm afraid we'll have to hold a big one this year." Regardless of whether it was to reward the three armies or to gather information from various parties. At that time, whether they want to be the emperor or not, it will no longer be our problem. After so many years, I'm also very tired. Li, you can't be so heartless as to make me wake up before the sun rises every day to attend morning court, right? Speaking of which, actually back then, I felt that the position of the emperor was simply not for humans. You get angry earlier than a chicken, you sleep later than a dog, you can't eat or do that. The woman you like may not be able to marry, and even if you marry, you may not like her. The slightest mistake will cause you to be scolded by the imperial censor, and you have to endure it to show that you are open-minded and magnanimous. Otherwise, the imperial censor will fiercely record you in the history books. All right, the more you say, the more inappropriate it is. Yi Li did not know whether to laugh or cry, but she had to admit that Mo Xiaoyao's words were somewhat reasonable. More importantly, after hearing Mo Xiaoyao's words, her mood immediately relaxed a lot. It's good that you don't regret it. Then, Li should persevere together with I. We don't want to be the emperor and empress. When Mo Xiaoyao ascends a throne, we will be the retired emperor and empress dowager. Yeah. Just as Mo Xiaoyao was happily speaking, his face suddenly stiffened. Yi Li looked at him strangely. "What's wrong?" Mo Xiaoyao stiffly held little Exen the little girl's black eyes innocently looking at her mother. His Highness Prince Ding's snow-white robes were stained with a large patch of water, and a lot of water had quietly slid down the hem of his robes. Chapter 1045. After returning to Lee City, Yili put down the things in her hands and focused on taking care of the children. Although they left their parents not long after they were 1 month old, perhaps due to the nature of mother and child, the two babies became familiar with their mother in less than 2 days. That clingy appearance made it seem as if they had been by Yi Li's side since birth and had not left for a single day. Speaking of which, Yi Li was considered a soldier on the battlefield in both her previous and current lives. Especially soldiers who had been on the battlefield, it was inevitable that there would be a murderous aura around them. However, Yi Li was not like that. No matter how tragic the battle was on the battlefield, after the battlefield changed clothes, she was still a gentle beauty who came from a scholarly family. Even her eyebrows carried a faint warmth and gentleness. It was no wonder that the two children were so happy to see their mother. Children were always naturally close to things that were softer and warmer. In the main courtyard of the Prince Ding mansion, the spacious room was covered with a thick carpet from the western regions. All the furnishings in the room were polished and covered with cotton cloth. There were also various toys on the ground. The two babies were placed on the ground and allowed to play around. The babies who were only 11 months old had already started to learn to walk. Lin, who was born first, was already able to walk steadily on his own. Although Xian, was born earlier, his body was actually weaker than his younger brother. He preferred to sit on the ground and play. Seeing his younger brother walking around, he reached out his small hand to pull him. The floor was covered with a thick carpet. Lin was pulled to sit on the ground, but did not cry in pain. He smiled happily at his sister. Yili also sat on the ground. Looking at the two babies giggling, a faint smile appeared on her lips. Princess Consort, Second Madame Su, and Madame Lung are here. Outside the door, a maid reported softly. Before they came in, Murong Ting's voice came from outside. Li, you seem to be very free. Yili looked up and saw Murong Ting, Qin Zheng, Hua, Tianxiang, Mo Wuyo, and Shun Yunj standing at the door. She couldn't help but smile. Why are you here? Come in quickly. Qin Zheng looked inside and covered her mouth with a smile. It's very lively outside. You seem to be very free. You should come out. It won't be easy for us to enter with so many people. It was very clean inside. Obviously, it was specially made for children. With so many people going in, wouldn't the snow-white carpet be dirted? Although they were all women now, the group of women who had been educated since they were young, except for Murong Ting and Shinyinge, none of them had the nerve to take off their shoes in front of outsiders. Yili smiled and picked up a baby in each hand, placing them in Qin Zheng and Mu Rongting's hands before walking out. Murong Ting and Qin Zheng had both given birth to their own children before and were very familiar with the two babies in the past half a year. The two little fellows were not shy at all in their arms. Murong Ting hugged her pink and tender heart and said that she also wanted a daughter. Sister Li, no, it's Princess Consort. Yinga walked up to Yi Li and gently bowed. She was more obedient and quiet than when she was in Jiangnan. Yi Li pulled her and said with a smile, just call me Sister Li. Look at them. Who is polite to me? Is Yungu used to living in Li City? Shinyinga nodded and said, the two Aunt Su are very good to me. Sister Tianxiang, Sister Zheng Sister Ting, and Wuyo are also very good to me. And Yungu has a foster father. Foster father? Yili raised her eyebrows. Mo Wuyo pursed his lips and said with a smile, it's my master. Didn't Master tell Princess Consort when he went to Feihong Pass? Master said that Yungu is much more talented in medicine than me and likes her very much. He took Yungu as his foster daughter. Yili raised her eyebrows. She remembered that Shan Yang and Yunji's fathers seemed to be related, but this seniority. Then she thought about it. Shen Yang and Yungu probably only had each other left in this world. What relationship in this world was closer than a father and daughter? Since Shen Yang made this decision, he must have his reasons, so she didn't think too much about it. Shen Yungu nodded repeatedly and said, yes, foster father's medical skills are very good, even better than my father's. Foster father said that as long as I study hard, I will be as good as him in the future. Perhaps it was because of her family background. Yungu was born with a unique talent an interest in medicine. Speaking of which, her eyebrows couldn't help but add a bit of brilliance. As long as you're happy, Yili smiled and said. Then she looked at the girls in front of her and said, when we were eating last night, eldest aunt and second aunt told me that now that things are finally peaceful, they are anxious to arrange the marriage of third brother and fourth brother. Qin Zheng nodded and said, Lear is right. Mother and eldest aunt are really anxious. Third brother just had to go to war, and fourth brother is far away in Shieling. Mother also said that this time, no matter what, we have to let third brother get married first. Zheng Hua Tianxiang was so embarrassed that her face turned red. She glared fiercely at Qin Zheng. You are usually the most gentle and elegant. Why are you also so? Mu Ronting rolled her eyes and said, just be happy. We won't laugh at you. Yesterday, the third young master of the Su family rushed to give you something as soon as he came back. Do you think we didn't see it? After saying that, she glanced at an exquisite and elegant pearl hairpin on Hua Tianxiang's head, her face full of kindness and ridicule. Mo Wuyo, who was also about to become a bride-to-be, carefully hid in a corner so as not to be caught in the crossfire with Hua Tianxiang. It was not that she didn't have sisterly feelings, but she couldn't resist Sister Murong's sharp tongue. On the contrary, Shen Yungu, who was clear-minded, looked happy. Is Sister Tianxiang getting married? Yunj will definitely give you a good gift. Mu Rongting chuckled and looked at Shen Yungu. Yunj, you're not planning to give me pills again, are you? Shen Yungu blinked. What's wrong? Yili was also very puzzled. What's wrong? Shen Yunji's pharmaceutical skills could be said to be better than her master. The pills she made were naturally not ordinary. Qin Zheng covered her mouth and laughed. Last New Year, Yunj gave each of us a bottle of pills. Last October, Uncle's birthday was also a bottle of pills. This year, on eldest brother's birthday, it was also a bottle of pills. In addition, eldest brother received the most pills in our family. Now, eldest brother's face stiffens when he sees the pills. The people next to them also looked like they wanted to laugh. Yili was amused and couldn't help but laugh. She was really curious about how young Master Qingshan looked when he was frightened by a small bottle of pills. Shen Yungu pouted and looked at the crowd blankly. What's wrong with her giving them pills? She gave the two Aunt Sues pills to maintain their health, gave Sister Zheng pills to maintain their beauty, and gave the two uncles and Su Qingshan pills to maintain their health. It turned out that the Su family saw this little girl's naivety. Moreover, she sincerely made the pills herself, so they were embarrassed to talk to her about the importance of giving gifts. However, the Su family didn't care about these empty gifts. A sincere gift was always more precious than a hypocritical one, wasn't it? However, young Master Qingshan suffered. Miss Yungu believed that Su Qingshan was seriously injured and left behind an illness. Whenever Su Qingshan had a headache or fever, the little girl would stuff a pile of various pills into his hand. Now, the Su family didn't even go to the doctor to get medicine when they were sick. They could just ask Su Qingshan for it. Anyway, Miss Yunji's medicine was always much more effective than the medicine prescribed by ordinary doctors. Chapter 1046. Yili smiled and rubbed her head. It's nothing. Yunji's medicine is very good. Your medical skills must have improved a lot these days. Yunji's eyes lit up. Sisterly, you've also used my medicine? Yili nodded. Mr. Shun brought some from Feihong Pass. The effect is very good. Yungu said proudly. That's good. I will definitely become the most famous doctor in the world in the future. Then, just like my adoptive father when he was young, I will practice medicine to help the world and save many, many people. Practice medicine to help the world? It was a great dream. Yili raised her eyebrows and smiled. What did Big Brother say? Shen Yungu blinked blankly and said, Su Qingshan? What did he want to say? Oh, he said that I will definitely become a very powerful doctor. Looking at the calm and happy little girl in front of her, Yili couldn't help but cover her face and sigh. Sure enough, she thought too much. She didn't expect that the marriage of the elegant, immortal young master had become a big problem in everyone's heart. Even she couldn't help but want to pull him together with other girls. Since Su Qingqian didn't have any thoughts, Yili nodded calmly and smiled. Big brother is right. Yin Ge will definitely become a female doctor. Mu Rongting rolled her eyes at Yi Li and said, "What's right? Yin Ge is 1 year older than Wu Yo, right? A girl at this age should consider marrying into a good family, not whether to become a female doctor." Yili looked sideways at Qin Zheng. Qin Zheng held Lin, and lowered her head to laugh. Yili smiled in her heart. She turned her eyes and gave Wu Yo a look. Wu Yo immediately understood and pulled Yin Ge out to play. Seeing the two little girls go out hand in hand, Yili smiled and said, "Wu Yo and Yin Ge have a good relationship." Hua Tianxiang smiled and said, "Isn't that so? Both of them have good tempers, and they usually study medicine together with Mr. Shun. It's only been a few days, and outsiders don't think that Wu Yo and I are cousins. The two of them are more like sisters." About Yunj, Yili frowned and did not know what to say. Murong Ting smiled and said, "The first madam of the Su family is very satisfied with Yunj as the eldest daughter-in-law of the Su family. However, one of the two parties involved is really stupid, and the other pretends to be crazy. The first madam of the Su family doesn't dare to tell the little girl directly for fear of scaring her. However, that young Master Qingshun didn't say anything. I heard that he made Lady Su very angry." Yili thought for a moment and said, "Perhaps Big Brother really doesn't have that intention." Murong Ting rolled her eyes. "If you don't mean that, then don't hold her up. She's Mr. Shun's adopted daughter, the future female miracle doctor. Many people are eagerly waiting to propose marriage to her." Murong Ting's words were not a joke. Yin Ge was beautiful, her martial arts were high, and her personality was cheerful and pure. This kind of personality might not be good in the noble families, but it was the favorite of the generals who had been on the battlefield. Many generals in the Mahist army wanted to marry such a daughter-in-law for their sons, and many young generals in the Mahist army admired such a beautiful and cheerful girl. Needless to say, Yunji's medical skills were highly praised by Shenyang. Even if she had no appearance and no family background, there were still countless people waiting to propose marriage to her with betrothal gifts. Unfortunately, this beautiful and adorable little girl always had a handsome and otherworldly young master in snow-white robes by her side from time to time. Countless pursuers had been defeated before they had time to make a move. This was also why Murong Ting disliked Su Qingqian the most. If he was interested in the girl, he should be more direct. If he was not interested, he should stay away and not hinder other people's pursuit. He could not bully the girl just because she lived in the mountains since she was a child and did not know much about the ways of the world. After all, Yinji's age was really not young. Except for Hua Tianxiang, who was forced to marry because of the situation, the girls in this world were not married at the age of 15 or 16. Zheng, what does Big Brother mean? Qin Zheng covered her mouth and smiled. Lear, don't ask me. I rarely see Big Brother. But I always feel that Big Brother should be different to Yin Ge. After all, young Master Qingxian had been so busy in the past 6 months that even Madame Su could not find him most of the time, but he still had time to accompany Yin Ge to go out for a stroll. It did not seem like he had no intention at all. However, young Master Qingxian's thoughts were not something ordinary people like them could guess. Seeing the 3 people gossiping about young Master Qingxian, Hua Tianxiang did not care about her shyness and said with a smile, "If young Master Qingxian is really interested in Yin Ge, I'm afraid young Master Qingxian will be in big trouble." What do you mean? The 3 people asked curiously. In this world, there were not many people who could make young Master Qingxian feel big trouble. It was no wonder that the 3 of them were so curious. Hua Tianxiang smiled and said, Yin Ge grew up in the mountains since she was a child. Her temperament is as simple as a child's. If an ordinary girl has young Master Qingxian accompanying her often, even if she is not wild with joy, she should at least be flattered. But you see Yin Ji's little face every time. Mu Rongting and Qin Zheng looked at each other and could not help but laugh. They did not know why, but young Master Qingxian looked very kind but Yingge seemed to be really afraid of Su Qingchen. In front of young Master Qingchen, she did not look like a little girl who had just awakened to love, but like a stupid student standing in front of the teacher who had done something wrong. If Su Qingchen really had something to do with Yingge, then young Master Qingchen's love life would not be easy. Yili took Lin from Qin Zheng's arms, who stretched out his small hand to her, and said with a smile, "Forget it, I will ask Big Brother about this later. As for third brother and fourth brother's marriage, what do eldest aunt and second aunt think?" Qin Zheng smiled and said, "Mother and eldest aunt think that third brother and fourth brother's marriage will be held together in August this year. We have also discussed it with Mrs. Yang, and Mrs. Yang has no objection." Yili smiled and said, "That's good. It seems that our family has a lot of happy events this year. At that time, Tianxiang and Wu Yu will directly get married from the Prince Ding mansion." Hua Tianxiang's delicate face was crimson, and she glared at Yili and said, "We heard that Liner and Exant are going to have a first birthday banquet, so we came to see if there is anything we can help with. Why are you making fun of me?" Yili sighed softly and said with a faint smile, "These things will be taken care of by others. Tianxiang, you should be at ease as a bride. These years you have been wronged." Speaking of which, they married into the Prince Ding mansion early, and Qin Zheng and Mu Rongting also married one after another. Now, even Mo Xiaobao was almost 10 years old, but Hua Tianxiang's marriage had been delayed until now. She was 26 or 27 years old, which is not considered old in the previous life, but in this generation, a 20-year-old girl who was not married was already called an old girl who could not get married. The pressure Hua Tianxiang was under could be imagined. Hua Tianxiang's beautiful eyes were slightly red, and she whispered, "What nonsense, I am fine." Chapter 10:47. Yili patted her hand and smiled. "Yes, it will be better in the future. Li, are you going to be the Empress?" Seeing that the atmosphere was a bit heavy, Murong Ting quickly changed the topic and asked jokingly. Yili raised her eyebrows and smiled. "Who said I'm going to be the Empress?" Murong Ting looked at her with a smile and said, "Prince Ding has defeated the northern tribes, Emo Jingli, and Jinnum of Gojoseon. Isn't it time to ascend the throne? Lier, who will be the Empress if not you? We won't laugh at you. It's so glorious to have a close friend who's going to be the Empress." Yili smiled. "Then I'll have to disappoint you. I won't be the Empress for the time being." "Why?" Murong Ting was confused. If Prince Ding became the emperor and Lier wasn't the empress, the whole world wouldn't agree. Hua Tianxiang rolled her eyes and said, "That must be because Prince Ding doesn't plan to ascend the throne." "But Lier, Prince Ding really—" Yili smiled helplessly. It seemed that Mo Xiaoyao's ascension was indeed what everyone wanted. Even ladies like Hua Tianxiang and Murong Ting didn't believe it. After receiving Yi Li's affirmation, everyone was silent for a while. Murong Ting sighed and looked at Yi Li. "Actually, there are benefits to Prince Ding not ascending the throne. These days, I've heard many people planning how to send their daughters into the palace to be concubines. Zheng there are many people who want to use the Su family's connections, right?" Qin Zheng nodded silently. These days, there were indeed many people who came to the Su family's door to curry favor. After all, although Princess Ding's surname was Yi, the Prince Ding mansion clearly only recognized the Su family as Princess Ding's relatives. However, Yili had just returned. The Su family didn't want to upset Yili, so they didn't tell her. In fact, this kind of thing was expected. In the past, the Prince Ding mansion had not yet been stabilized. When they were fighting for the world, the situation was constantly changing. It could be said that anything was possible. Naturally, no one cared whether Prince Ding married a wife or a courtyard full of beautiful wives and concubines. Even if Prince Ding didn't want to marry her, it could only be said that Prince Ding was proud and didn't care about nepotism. However, once the world was settled, whether it was for the sake of etiquette, the benefits of the nobles, or for the sake of balancing the powers, the expansion of the 6 palaces was imperative. No matter how powerful Mo Xiaoyao was, it was impossible for him to kill all the officials who opposed him. This vast empire could not be supported by the Su family alone. These people understood this point, so they took it for granted that once Mo Xiuyao ascended the throne, he would inevitably take in concubines like the previous Prince Ding. In history, it wasn't that there were no examples of emperors and empresses being deeply in love with each other. However, once they ascended the throne, which emperor didn't have 3 palaces and 6 courtyards? Liu Qinzheng looked at Yi Li with some worry. Yi Li smiled faintly and said, "Don't worry, Xiuyao will take care of these problems." Murong Ting was a little worried and said, "Prince Ding." It wasn't that she didn't believe in Prince Ding's character. Murong Ting was very envious of how Prince Ding and Lear had been together for so many years. However, the position of emperor often meant that there were countless unavoidable choices. Yi Li said softly, "I believe in him. No matter what happens, we will stand together and face it." Seeing that Yi Li was so calm, Murong Ting also relaxed and nodded heavily. "No matter what, Lear, we will support you." "Thank you." Yi Li smiled. "Nyang nyang." The little princess in Murong Ting's arms wriggled her small body and reached out her small hand to Yi Li. Yi Li had no choice but to hand to Qinzheng and take Xiner into her arms. She smiled and said, "Xiner, what's wrong?" Murong Ting looked at Xiner, sitting in Yi Li's arms with a big smile on her tender little face. She couldn't help but say sourly, "Aunt Su is right. You really have no conscience. Before your mother came back, Aunt Murong played with you every day. Now that your mother is back, she doesn't want me anymore." "Aunt, nyang nyang." The little princess smiled even more happily in Yi Li's arms, completely not understanding Murong Ting's complaints. Hua Tianxiang held Lin and teased him while thoughtfully saying, "Lin, Prince Ding is not willing to ascend the throne because of this, right?" It had to be said that Hua Tianxiang, who was born in a meritorious family, had a clearer understanding of many things than Qinzheng and Murong Ting. Yi Li was startled and said with a smile, "He said he doesn't want to attend court." Everyone was speechless. What kind of reason was this? Reporting to Princess, young Master Chun invites Princess to the study. Outside the door, a guard hurriedly reported. Hearing this, Yi Li raised her eyebrows. She immediately heard the difference. Mo Xiuyao was also in the study at this time. Why was it not Prince Chun who invited her, but young Master Chun? What happened? The guard looked at Yi Li awkwardly and said, Prince Chun is furious in the study. Young Master Chun invites Princess to take a look. I know, you can go. Yi Li sighed. She stood up and called Xiner into Qinzheng's arms and said with a smile, I'll be back soon. The little princess babbled and grabbed Yi Li's hair and refused to let go. Yi Li helplessly frowned, shook her head, and said with a smile, Forget it. I'll take you with me. Xiner also misses Imperial Father, right? Leave Xiner to me, Qinzheng said. Although she had never seen Prince Ding get angry, she had heard of it. She didn't want to scare the child. Moreover, Qinzheng had a rough idea of why Prince Ding got angry. She said softly, Don't mind what others say. Yi Li nodded and said, Don't worry, nothing will happen. After a while, she finally persuaded the little princess to let go. Yi Li went in and changed her clothes before walking in the direction of the study. Chapter 1048. Seeing Yi Li go out, Hua Tianxiang and the other two looked at each other worriedly and sighed helplessly. Every family has its own difficulties. Even for a couple like Yi Li and Mo Xiuyao, who could be said to be the most powerful couple in the world, there were also times when they had no other choice. Murong Ting sighed and said, Fortunately, Lung Er doesn't have much ability, and no one forced him to marry a wife or take a concubine. As for those blind people who wanted to send themselves to her door, she naturally had a way to deal with them. But a situation like the Prince Ding mansion couldn't be solved by driving those people out like she did. Qinzheng also sighed faintly. Murong Ting paused and looked at Hua Tianxiang and said, Prince Ding is still unwilling to ascend the throne. Is it really because of this? Hua Tianxiang glanced at her and said, "Even if it's not all, it should be a little bit. But it's fine if you only hear these words here, but you must not speak of them outside, including Lung Haoyu." Murong Ting rolled her eyes at him. "Of course I know. Do you think I'm an idiot? These people are really annoying." When the Prince Ding mansion was in dire straits, why didn't they rush to marry their daughters to Prince Ding? Now that Prince Ding has the world in his hands, they come over talking about etiquette and clan rules. They even secretly squeezed the Su family and wanted to monopolize power. Really? Qin Zheng patted the back of her hand with a smile and said, "Okay, I'm not angry. What are you angry for? Since Lier knows what to do, we can't help much. Let's just watch." Murong Ting smiled and said, "Who said we can't help much? This girl has at least persuaded a few girls not to marry Prince Ding." Hua Tianxiang raised her eyebrows. "You have such eloquence." Prince Ding was now the future emperor. Not to mention that Murong Ting's eloquence wasn't very good. Even if she was, she might not be able to persuade those girls who wanted to be the emperor's concubine. Murong Ting snorted and said, "They must have lost their minds and forgotten what kind of person Prince Ding is. Prince Ding was not someone who would not kill women. I told them about the fate of the women who adored Prince Ding, and several of them expressed on the spot that they didn't want to be concubines." Qin Zheng did not know whether to laugh or cry. "Tinger, do you think they can decide whether to marry Prince Ding or not? What's the use of scaring them?" Murong Ting was stunned and lowered her head in dejection. Wasn't that the case? How many things in this world could be decided by a woman? Women who wanted to marry Prince Ding as concubines naturally yearned for glory and wealth. But even if they didn't want to marry, what could they do? At the end of the day, they didn't have a choice whether to marry or not. Yili stood outside the study and did not enter immediately. Before she entered the study, she heard Mo Xiaoyao's voice. When Mo Xiaoyao was truly angry, he was very calm, but this kind of calmness was often accompanied by shocking bloodshed. Perhaps it was because of this reason that Su Qingshan had secretly sent people to invite her over. After all, the war had just been settled, and the world was not truly at peace. Su Qingshan also did not wish for news of Prince Ding killing meritorious officials to spread at this time. Although young Master Qingshan did not think that many of these people had any merit. What's wrong with not ascending the throne? Don't you want to live? These few years, the Northwest has been without an emperor. I don't see anyone who can't live. Mo Xiaoyao said lightly. A country cannot live without a ruler for a day. If that's the case, what do I need you for? Prince. Clearly, there were still people who did not give up and wanted to continue persuading him. Yili saw that if she did not enter, Mo Xiaoyao would really explode. Only then did she push open the door to the study and slowly walk in. "Prince, what's wrong? I haven't even walked in, and I can already hear you getting angry?" Mo Xiaoyao glared at Su Qingshan unhappily. Su Qingshan smiled, but did not say anything. "Li, why are you here?" Mo Xiaoyao walked down from his seat and reached out to take Yi Li's hand. Yi Li smiled faintly and said, "I thought of some things that I wanted to discuss with Prince, so I came over. Did I come a bad time?" Mo Xiaoyao pulled her forward and said, "It's nothing. Sit down and talk. If there's nothing else, all of you can leave." Seeing Mo Xiaoyao pull Yi Li to the main seat and sit down, the people below could not help but frown, and some even showed some dissatisfaction. As for the trusted aides of the Prince Ding mansion, they quickly lowered their heads, wishing that they could dig a hole and bury themselves in it. They grumbled in their hearts, "If you want to die, at least wait until we're gone. Prince, your subjects are discussing matters with Prince." A gray-haired old man came forward and said in a low voice. Yili glanced at him. He looked familiar, but not too familiar. She remembered that he was from a prestigious family in the Chu state, and could be considered an old subject of two dynasties. When the northern tribes invaded, he came to the Prince Ding mansion to seek refuge because it was closer to the northwest. However, he had not done much, so it was natural that Yili did not know his name. Mo Xiaoyao glanced at him unhappily and said, "Discussion? I have been sitting here listening to your nonsense since early in the morning. Do you think I have nothing better to do?" If you have any problems in the future, come and tell I after the results are out. The old man was almost choked by Immerse Xiaoyao's words. How was the coronation ceremony nonsense? Chapter 1049. Yi Li did not care about these people. What truly worried Yi Li were the old officials of the Mahist army, who were also eager to try. Many of these people had followed the Prince Ding mansion for generations. They were not like Feng Jiao and Leng Haoyu, who had been friends with Immerse Xiaoyao since childhood. They had the trust of confidence and brotherly affection. But in terms of their relationships in the Prince Ding mansion and the Mahist army, they were more complicated than confidants like Feng Jiao and Leng Haoyu. These people had followed the Prince Ding mansion and had been suppressed by the imperial house of the Dechu state for many years. They could be considered loyal. Now that the prince was finally going to unify the world, it was time for them to hold their heads high. It was not their fault for thinking like this. Hadn't the founding officials of the previous dynasties all been like this? When was there ever a dynasty where all the benefits and credit of founding a country were taken by a single family? But the master they encountered was Immerse Xiaoyao, who did not play by the rules. Yi Li sighed softly. She raised a hand and patted the back of Immerse Xiaoyao's hand to calm him down. Even though Immerse Xiaoyao was not angry, Yi Li could feel the coldness coming off of him sitting next to him. But this kind of situation, in the eyes of the old officials, was not proper. These scholars were not generals on the battlefield. They had to make do with etiquette and rules. Yi Li, as a Wang Fei, had barged into the study for discussion and sat shoulder to shoulder with Prince Ding. In the eyes of these old scholars, this was an act of treason and not following the virtue of a woman. Prince, as a woman, Wang Fei should abide by the rules of the house and retreat to the inner compound. How could she sit so openly in the hall for discussion? This is not proper. An old official with a white beard trembled as he said, Wang Fei is also from the Su family, the scholarly family. Such conduct isn't an insult to Sir Qingyun's reputation. Boudoir? Immerse Xiaoyao laughed coldly. He looked down at the old man with a pained expression and asked, when Lei Jinting led his troops against the border, why didn't anyone think that Ai's beloved concubine was a woman and that she should abide by the rules? This time, when I was in trouble, why didn't you think that Wang Fei was a woman? Why didn't you go to the front lines to lead troops for Wang Fei? Now that the world is at peace, you remember that the princess consort is a woman? So, the so-called etiquette of loyalty and filial piety is to hide behind a woman when danger comes, and then sit on the glory, splendor, and wealth that the woman fought for you, and at the same time criticize that woman for not being disciplined? That's not bad. That's a good idea. I am very impressed. These simple words made the faces of the few old gentlemen, who were speaking righteously just a moment ago, turn red. These people were not the trusted subordinates of the Prince Ding mansion. Naturally, they did not know Prince Ding's character. He was just relying on his reputation and seniority to flaunt his seniority. Immerse Xiaoyao waved his hand. He stared at the crowd and said coldly, what Wang Fei wants to do is not up to you to interfere. I want you to remember, whatever Wang Fei says, whatever she does, is Ai's idea. If you dare to disobey, don't blame I for being merciless. In the large study, everyone felt their scalps go cold. They hurriedly said, this subordinate obeys. After dismissing the crowd, Immerse Xiaoyao's anger had not dissipated. He glared at Su Qingchun with displeasure. Young Master Qingchun elegantly drank his tea and said lightly, what are you glaring at me for? If you don't call Li over, do you really want to kill a few people to establish your authority? Immerse Xiaoyao snorted. You think I don't dare? Those old men only knew how to talk nonsense all day. They could not do anything proper. They only knew how to cause trouble for him. He really didn't know why he took in these people in the first place. He would rather use these people to exchange for a few commoners who knew how to farm and work. Su Qingchun smiled leisurely. These people are useless. Sometimes they are quite annoying, but it just so happens that we cannot do without them. Prince, it is true that these people are old and rotten, but each one of them can be said to have students all over the world. They are so old that they have become shrewd. If they really cause trouble, the effect will not be inferior to that of an army of thousands. The pen in the hands of a scholar was much more troublesome than the sword in the hands of an enemy. Of course, if Mo Xiaoyao wanted to be a tyrant who burned books and buried scholars, then he did not need to care. Yili sat beside Mo Xiaoyao. She frowned slightly and said, "Is it to persuade Xiaoyao to ascend the throne as soon as possible?" Su Qingchun looked at Mo Xiaoyao with a smile that was not a smile. She said, jokingly, "If it is only about ascending the throne, why would it stop here? Those old officials have nothing better to do. They even thought of setting up a harem for the new emperor. They were just about to present the imperial concubine selection to the Wang Fei. If the new emperor ascends the throne, if there is only one Wang Fei, wouldn't it look bad? At that time, they can confer the title of imperial concubine together. Look, even the ranks are listed. Under the empress, there should be 2 imperial concubines for imperial concubines, Zhao Yi, Zhao Rong, etc." Su Qingchun ignored Mo Xiaoyao's murderous gaze. She smiled and handed the booklet in her hand to Yili. The reason why Mo Xiaoyao was so furious was because those people thought they were clever and wanted to directly send the booklet to Yili. However, Mo Xiaoyao was one step ahead and intercepted it. Yili took it and flipped through it. It really did write several pages. Yili smiled and shook her head. She looked at Su Qingchun and frowned. Did someone go to Su family to disturb eldest aunt and second aunt these days? Su Qingchun looked gently at Yili and said, "These are all small matters. Those madams came to visit. We can't just ignore them. They don't dare to be impudent in front of mother and second aunt." Yili frowned and said, "I'm afraid that after a few more days, they will go and disturb grandfather." Su Qingchun didn't care and said lightly, "Grandfather is already so old. How can he not be able to see through these things? Lier, father, second uncle, and I have the intention of supporting you. No matter what you do, the Su family will support you." Yili nodded and said softly, "I understand, age." Su Qingchun stood up and said, "Now it seems that not ascending the throne was the right thing to do. We haven't even ascended the throne yet, but many people are already impatient. Moreover, things had happened too quickly this time. There might be someone behind this. It's time to clean up the subordinates of the Prince Ding mansion. As a father, don't be too lazy and throw everything to your son. Your son will still need many years to deal with these big matters." The last sentence was naturally for Mo Xiaoyao to hear. Mo Xiaoyao said with a sour expression, "I know. If they dare to casually stretch out their hands in front of I will break their limbs." Su Qingchun left, leaving only Mo Xiaoyao and Yili in the study. Yili smiled faintly and pulled down Mo Xiaoyao's handsome face. She said, "Are you still angry?" Mo Xiaoyao laughed coldly and said, "If they really want to be emperor, I don't mind showing them what a tyrant is. I don't want my husband to become a notorious tyrant," Yili said with a smile. Mo Xiaoyao pulled her into his arms and said with a smile, "If I become a tyrant, how about Yili become a demon empress?" Yili leaned into Mo Xiaoyao's arms and couldn't help but twitch her lips. As a soldier who had sacrificed her life for the country in the new era, being a demon empress was too much of a challenge to her worldview. Although they said that, they both understood that neither of them could truly act willfully without thinking of the consequences. Mo Xiaoyao was very cruel to his enemies and never showed any mercy. However, he had always been very soft-hearted towards his own people. Chapter 1050. They were unable to challenge the traditions of this era that had existed for thousands of years. That was why Mo Xiaoyao chose to put this issue aside. If he didn't ascend the throne or become an emperor, then there wouldn't be any harem problems. As a prince, having an heir was the best way to answer to the Prince Ding mansion. The previous kings of the Prince Ding mansion didn't request for a large number of wives and concubines. On the other hand, Mo Xiaoyao truly didn't have any interest in the throne. What he liked was the process of conquering the world and not that high and mighty golden dragon throne. He didn't want to be tied to that position, but once he sat on that position, many things would become out of his control. Mo Xiuyao intimately rubbed Yi Li's hair and said with a smile, "Li, you just need to happily accompany Xener and Liner to play. I will take care of these annoying things. When Xiao Bao grows up, we can go out and play and live the life we like freely." "Okay, I'll listen to you." Yi Li faintly smiled. She lowered her eyes and said in a low voice, "If those people continue to disturb the Su family and grandfather, Lily can just take care of them. I've said it before, no matter what Lily does, it's Ai's idea." Mo Xiuyao said in a low voice, "Even if Lily wanted to kill everyone, these crimes could be taken by Ai." However, Mo Xiuyao didn't say this because he knew that with Li's temperament, she definitely wouldn't do this. Lily is soft-hearted. If you don't want to do something you can't do, I will do it for you. Yi Li's prediction wasn't wrong. After Mo Xiuyao mercilessly demoted a few of the most active people, these people who were clamoring to ascend the throne and taken concubines immediately quieted down. However, very quickly, there were people who thought a new way out. In front of benefits and wealth, there would always be countless people who would do whatever it took to get in. In the bamboo forest behind Lishan Academy outside the city, Master Qingyun was playing chess with Suja. Suja looked at the chessboard and pondered while holding a black piece. He smiled and said, "Now that Prince Ding's great cause is about to succeed, why is Elder Su still frowning?" As the saying goes, keeping watch at night is harder than starting a business. With Prince Ding's intelligence and temperament, as long as there were no accidents, it would not be difficult for him to unify the world. However, since ancient times, there have been countless people who have obtained the world, but were unable to bring peace to the world. Who could say that the Titan Emperor of ancient times wasn't a peerless emperor? However, after unifying the world, they only enjoyed the country for less than 30 years. How can we not sigh in disappointment? Master Qingyun's hair and beard were all white. His appearance was thin, and he looked like a carefree wild crane. However, the old man's entire life was devoted to educating the students. How could he truly see through the world of mortals and be detached from the world? Suja also sighed and slowly put down a piece. He said, "Other things aside, Prince Ding's delay in ascending the throne and taking in concubines is detrimental to the stability of the world. Ascending the throne to become the emperor, appointing an empress, taking in concubines, and having children. Not only did this represent the beginning of a dynasty, it also gave the people of the world a stable message, calming the hearts of the people. Prince Ding's personality is too similar to the founding Prince Ding back then. Back then, the first Prince Ding of the Dechu state, Imo Lan Yun, had not insisted on marrying the princess of the previous dynasty. Otherwise, the founding ancestor of the Dechu state might not have been able to sit on the throne. And now, there wasn't even a chance for the events of the past to repeat. In today's world, other than Prince Ding, no one else could sit on the throne, and no one would be able to convince the masses. Elder Su, should we go and persuade Prince Ding? Suja hesitated for a moment before finally speaking. Although they were far away from the city, they still knew about the big and small matters in Glass City. It wasn't a good thing for the ruler and his subjects to be at odds with each other before the country was even established. Mr. Qingyun waved his hand and smiled. No need, they know what to do. Right now, it just looks a little messy. Those who truly know their position are all very astute. It's better for it to be messy now than to leave these problems to be passed down from generation to generation. Suja was startled. He said, "Isn't this too risky?" Since the beginning of the world, the most important thing was to seek peace. That was why so many emperors had wantonly conferred titles when they first established the country. In the end, they had to spend a lot of effort to get rid of the problems. How could the wise founding emperors not know these questions? It was just a sentence that was forced by the situation. It was too risky to start removing the subjects before the world was settled. If they weren't careful, there would be chaos again. Mr. Qingyun smiled. We're old. It's inevitable that we have to be overcautious in everything we do. Since Prince Ding has this courage, why not take a look? Suja smiled bitterly and shook his head. Even you, as his grandfather, aren't worried. What do I have to worry about? However, I'm afraid that those old scholars will come to you soon. These people didn't have any ability, but they had a good reputation. They didn't have big hearts, but their tempers weren't small. After being rejected by Prince Ding and Princess Ding, it would be strange if they still came to find Mr. Qingyun. Sir, there are a few old gentlemen outside asking to see you. They say that they are old friends of Mr. Qingyun and Elder Su. A boy servant walked into the bamboo forest and reported respectfully. The two looked at each other and smiled. Suja smiled. They really come when they say they want to. Mr. Qingyun casually tossed the chess piece in his hand and smiled. Most of them can't be avoided. I haven't seen them for many years. It's good to see them. These people had come to visit several times when they first arrived at West Hill. However, they were all rejected by Mr. Qingyun for various reasons. Therefore, it could be said that he hadn't seen these people for many years. With Mr. Qingyun's age, status, and reputation, no one dared to be unhappy if he didn't want to see them. However, this time, these people probably wouldn't stop until they saw him. Mr. Qingyun wasn't really afraid of them. He was just old and didn't want to deal with these people with ulterior motives. Go invite them in. Yes. Chapter 1051. Greetings, Mr. Qingyun. Although these old scholars were very dignified outside, they still unconsciously lowered their heads in front of Mr. Qingyun. Although Mr. Qingyun looked like an amiable old immortal with his white beard and white hair, these people were all old. Naturally, they knew more about Mr. Qingyun than the average young man. Some of them were even Mr. Qingyun's disciples. Mr. Qingyun smiled and said, "Don't be so polite. You are all busy people. How can you have time to come to my mountain?" They didn't dare. They respected and admired Mr. Qingyun in front of them, but at the same time, there was a trace of envy in their hearts. If there was anyone with the best fortune in the world, Mr. Qingyun could be counted as one of them. Not to mention that his children and grandchildren were all successful. Young Master Qinchen was famous in the world when he was young. The fourth son of the Su family was a governor before he reached the age of 25. Even the third son of the Su family, who gave up literature and joined the army, had made outstanding contributions in the Mahist army. More importantly, he had a granddaughter who became Princess Ding. With these, the Su family could easily prosper for another 100 years. Mr. Qingyun was naturally very free. He didn't have to be so careful and calculate for the prosperity of the family like them. Mr. Qingyun ordered the servant to serve tea. Everyone sat down on the stone bench in the bamboo forest and drank tea. They were silent for a while. After drinking tea for a while, seeing Mr. Qingyun sitting leisurely without any change in his expression, someone finally couldn't sit still. "Mr. Qingyun, we came to disturb you today because we have something to ask of you." One of them stood up and smiled respectfully. Mr. Qingyun raised his eyes and looked at the person who spoke. His old eyes were unexpectedly calm and clear. He smiled faintly and said, "You are Zhao Zhifeng? You studied in Lishan Academy? Speaking of which, we haven't seen each other for more than 20 years, right?" The man who spoke was almost 60 years old. Hearing Mr. Qingyun's words, he quickly smiled and said, "Mr. Qingyun is right. I was taught by Mr. Qingyun." Master Qingyun had also become famous at a young age. Although he was less than 20 years older than him, when he was studying at Lishan Academy, Master Qingyun was already a great scholar. Although he wasn't Master Qingyun's inner disciple, according to the rules, he still had to act as Master Qingyun's disciple. However, this made Zhao Zhifeng, who had thought highly of himself for most of his life, feel a little embarrassed. Mr. Qingyun did not mind. He smiled and said, "What do you want to say?" Zhao Zhifeng hurriedly said, "Now that His Highness Prince Ding has pacified the world, it is time for him to ascend the throne and proclaim himself as the emperor to pacify the people." Appointing an empress taking in a concubine, re-establishing the imperial court, ordering all matters to return to their proper positions, and all officials to their proper duties, so as to calm the hearts of the common people. But yesterday, we sent a memorial to His Highness Prince Ding. Prince Ding was furious and resolutely refused to take a concubine. We are thinking if Mr. Qingyun should persuade Princess Ding. Princess Ding has done great service to the Prince Ding mansion. When His Highness Prince Ding ascends the throne, the Wang Fei will naturally be the empress. But if the Wang Fei is determined to monopolize His Highness Prince Ding, I'm afraid this will damage the reputation of the Wang Fei and the Su family. Mr. Qingyun thought for a moment and then raised his head to ask with a smile, "Is this what all of you think?" Everyone looked at each other and said in unison, "Mr. Qingyun, please put the world first. The Su family is the role model of all scholars in the world. They will handle this matter appropriately." Mr. Qingyun looked at the people in front of him and shook his head regretfully. These people were not young anymore. Some of them were only a few years younger than him. Were they so obsessed with fame that they were blinded by it? Everyone has been in Glass City for a long time. What do you think of the governance of the Northwest? Mr. Qingyun asked leisurely. Prince Ding is truly a wise ruler. The people of the Northwest live and work in peace. It is truly a prosperous era. Mr. Qingyun shook his head and said with a smile, "It is a bit exaggerated to say that it is a prosperous era. But it is true that people live and work in peace. In these 10 years, Prince Ding has not declared himself emperor. The people of the Northwest live and work in peace. It can be seen that whether he is emperor or not is not directly related to the stability of the world. But if Prince Ding does not declare himself emperor, it is not legitimate." Someone said anxiously. Mr. Qingyun said with a smile, "It is true that a country cannot do without a ruler. Prince Ding has the heart to conquer the world. He will not leave the world without a ruler. Now that Prince Ding is not willing to declare himself emperor, it is naturally not time yet. Why are you all so anxious?" Everyone looked at Mr. Qingyun with faint disappointment in their eyes. They originally thought that the Su family was willing to let Prince Ding ascend the throne as soon as possible. After all, after Prince Ding ascended the throne, the biggest contributor would definitely be the Su family. As long as Prince Ding ascended the throne, things would naturally be easy to handle in the future. But they did not expect that Mr. Qingyun really did not care. One of them stood up and said, "Mr. Qingyun is right. We should not say much about when Prince Ding will become emperor." But Prince Ding and Princess Consort have been married for more than 10 years. There is only Princess Consort in the backyard. It is not proper. Women value virtue. Wang Fei's behavior was a little too overbearing. How can she be the mother of the world in the future? Hearing this, Mr. Qingyun's eyes darkened. Just as he was about to speak, a clear voice came from outside the bamboo forest. "This old mister is wrong. The Dechu State's marriage system has a saying, wives are equal. Wives are equal to their husbands. Prince Ding is a genius, unparalleled in the world. Other than the extremely intelligent Princess Ding, who dares to say that they are equal to Prince Ding? Who dares to say that they are worthy of the title of Princess Ding?" A youth wearing blue robes walked into the bamboo forest. He scanned the people seated and continued, "Also, there is an ancient custom. The wife is the only mistress of the family. If she has been married for 20 years and has no children, then she can take concubines. Even if the wife has no children, the children of the concubines belong to the wife. Princess Ding married for 3 years and gave birth to a little Shitsi. Last year, she gave birth to a pair of twins. What is wrong with Prince Ding not taking any concubines? Since everyone is talking about the custom, why don't this one write to His Highness Prince Ding and restore the ancient custom? But if that's the case, the concubines in your families." Su Qingyun smiled at the crowd, but didn't say anything. You are twisting words and forcing logic." Everyone was so angry that their faces turned red. A few of the older ones pointed at Su Qingyun with trembling fingers. The ancient custom that Su Qingyun spoke of was from the ancient times. At that time, The customs were just established, and the people were simple. From the emperor to the lowly peddlers, there was no such thing as taking concubines. Therefore, the marriage system stipulated that if a woman married for 20 years and had no children, she could marry again. Even if a woman married again gave birth to children, she could not be superior to a woman who married for the first time. Later, the people's hearts gradually changed. It was stipulated that those who violated the marriage system and married again would be beaten 100 times and sentenced to 1 year in prison. However, later on, the morals of the world deteriorated day by day, and imperial power gradually flourished. These customs were gradually distorted by the rules, and became the common practice of having 3 wives and 4 concubines. Until now, perhaps only a family like the Sioux family still maintained a rule that a man could only take concubines after 40 if he had no children. If the ancient custom was forcefully restored, it would be a light punishment for the people in front of him to lose all their wives and concubines. Just the punishment of being beaten and sentenced would be enough to make them hover between life and death, and then lock them up until their bones turn to ash. Chapter 1052. Su Qingyan snorted in disdain. He walked in front of Master Qingyan and bowed respectfully. Grandson greets grandfather. Seeing his youngest grandson, Master Qingyan was very happy. He smiled and said, "You didn't arise. When did you come back? Have you seen your father and mother?" Su Qingyan grinned and said, "Grandson just came back. I passed by the foot of the mountain and came to visit grandfather. I thought grandfather was playing chess with Teacher Su. I didn't expect it to be so lively." Master Qingyan smiled and said, "Someone came to visit grandfather. You should go and meet them. These few are all famous scholars and old ministers of Great Chu." Su Qingyan gave them a sideways glance, then raised his voice and said, "Oh, so they are famous scholars in the Chu state." Su Qingyan emphasized the word sons of the Chu state, which made the old men uncomfortable. Although the Chu state had moved south, it was not destroyed yet. If they rushed to join the Prince Ding mansion, it would be seen as disloyal to outsiders. Regardless of whether Su Qingyan had this intention or not, at least in the ears of these old men, this was what he meant. Even the young master of the Su family couldn't tolerate being bullied by a brat who was still wet behind the ears. One of them sneered and said, "I heard that 5th young master, Su, has a high position at such a young age. Master Qingyan is very lucky." Su Qingyan did not seem to understand the other party's meaning. He smiled and said, "You don't have to envy grandfather. I came back this time to ask the prince and princess consort for help. I heard that the young masters in your family are all outstanding. Why don't you come with me to the north and work for the Princeton mansion? I'm still young and can be your son's assistant." The old man's face stiffened. If he had bullied Su Qingbai, he might have had something to say. However, it was a mistake to bully Su Qingyan. Everyone knew that the 5th young master of the Su family followed 4th young master, Su, to the north and led a group of commoners to farm. Now that 4th young master, Su, went to Xiling, 5th young master, Su, remained in the north. These self-proclaimed scholars were incomparably noble. How could they be willing to let their children and grandchildren mingle with a group of vulgar commoners? They would only complain that the Princeton mansion didn't give their children enough official positions. 5th young master Su was definitely the most eloquent of all the young masters of the Su family. He had inherited the teachings of 2nd master Su when he was young. But his sharp tongue was not because he was eloquent, but because his words were vicious and merciless. Not long after, a group of old pedants over the age of 50 hurriedly left with ashen faces. Watching the group of people leave, Su Qingyan snorted disdainfully. These people really have nothing better to do. What does Prince Ding taking a concubine have to do with them? Su Zhe, who was sitting next to him, shook his head and said with a smile, "5th young master is a smart person. How could he not know? How is this just a matter of taking a concubine? More importantly, Once Prince Ding ascended the throne and married a concubine, these people would become relatives of the emperor. If they gave birth to a son or a daughter, they would naturally be noble beyond words. They really aren't afraid of death, Su Qingyan muttered in a low voice. With Prince Ding's sinister personality, would he really allow himself to be manipulated by these old pedants who thought themselves infallible? Birds die in pursuit of food, and men die in pursuit of wealth. It has been like this since ancient times, Suja said with a smile. As expected, before the old men who went to visit Mr. Qingyun could sit down in the city, they heard Prince Ding's decree from the Prince Ding mansion. Prince Ding ordered young Master Qingshan to be the right prime minister, and Zhang Qilan, Lu Jingxian, Yuan Pei, and Leng Huai to be the great generals. It wasn't strange that all the generals under the command of the Mahist army would be rewarded. More importantly, all the important positions of the third rank and above were occupied by young people under the age of 40. For example, Feng Jiao, Leng Haoyu, and Han Mingxi were all in high positions without exception. Even Princess Ding's shadow guard, Qin Feng, was given the title of Commander Qi Lin of the Mahist army. At the same time, he was given the title of General Ming Lai. He was on the same level as Murong Shun and the other generals who led hundreds of thousands of troops. Zhuo Jing, Lin Han, and Wei Lin were also given official positions. They were placed in the Ministry of Revenue, Ministry of Justice, and Ministry of Appointments. As for He Su, who had outstanding military achievements, he was naturally given the title of Great General. Prince Ding's sudden move made countless people dumbfounded. Most of those so-called highly respected and aged elders of famous clans only had a high and mighty title. However, in the face of Prince Ding's punishment, everyone was speechless. Because the two members of the Su family, Su Hongyu and Su Hongyan, also had empty titles like them. The Su family had worked hard for the Prince Ding mansion these years. This time, Prince Ding and Princess Ding were out on an expedition at the same time, and such a big thing happened. If it weren't for the Su family, how could the Northwest not be in chaos? Since they didn't express their dissatisfaction, these raised idlers didn't have the face to say that they were dissatisfied. But Prince Ding's attitude made all the aristocratic families anxious. The people Prince Ding put in important positions were all old and trusted subordinates of the Prince Ding mansion and the Mahist army. He was even willing to use the princess consort's guards instead of using them, the descendants of the prestigious families. This was obviously a warning from Prince Ding. What's more, in the past few years, the Northwest's imperial examination system had gradually matured. These aristocratic families' chances of directly entering the imperial court were greatly reduced. No matter what aristocratic family they were, if no one spoke in the imperial court, they would only end up in decline. How could they not be better? Everyone had yet to regain their senses when the orders from Prince Ding's residence came one after another, causing these old men to feel dizzy and disoriented. The first to bear the brunt was a strange edict issued by Prince Ding. That was, from now on, except for the Defei's family, the families of concubines were not allowed to become officials in the imperial court for 3 generations. This edict was permanent and could not be disobeyed. As soon as this order was issued, the patriarchs of the aristocratic families who wanted to send their daughters into the Prince Ding mansion immediately vomited blood. Not allowed to become officials for 3 generations. What did this mean? This meant that your enemies would drag you into the mud and never be able to rise again. More importantly, this decree was still in effect. In other words, from now on, those who wanted to rely on nepotism to rise up the ranks could give up on the idea. If this news was only a warning to them, then the last order was clearly telling them that Prince Ding's intentions could not be disobeyed. The last order was that from now on, the Prince Ding mansion would no longer continue the aristocratic preferential treatment system of the Dechu state. All officials had to pass the imperial examination or be personally examined by Prince Ding's princess. Most importantly, the scholars who participated in the imperial examination had to serve at least 1 year of military service. The aristocratic families who had previously disapproved of the Northwest's so-called compulsory military service system were instantly shocked. Not only would their disciples not be able to become officials in the imperial court, they would not even have the right to participate in the imperial examination through the normal channels. In a short time, the number of people who came to the Su Fu increased. Inside the Prince Ding mansion, Su Hongyu, Su Qingshun, and the others were all present. Mo Xiaoyao pulled Yi Li to sit at the head of the table and lazily looked at the crowd. He was clearly in a good mood. 2 days ago, he had been angered by those old scholars, but he could not casually kill them. However, that was fine. If Mo Xiaoyao wanted to punish someone, he had plenty of ways to make them wish they were dead. Therefore, Prince Ding did not care that the bombs he had dropped had blown up the aristocratic families of the world. He only sat in the Wang Fu and pulled Yi Li along to watch the show, laughing to himself. Chapter 1053. Su Hongyu looked at him and shook his head. Prince, do you really intend to exterminate all these aristocratic families? Sometimes, these arrogant aristocratic families were very annoying, but sometimes they couldn't be left out. Moreover, if they were pushed too far, these people might all defect to Jiangnan. When that happened, it would not be good for the Prince Ding mansion's reputation. Mo Xiaoyao raised his eyebrows. Since they claim to be loyal to I, they have to follow I's rules. Could it be that they want this prince to accommodate them? As long as they know their limits, I will naturally give them a way out. As for those who were originally wavering, I do not care. These 2 days, I have caused a lot of trouble for Mr. Hongyu. Mr. Qing Yun was far away in the Lishan Academy, and it was not easy to see him. However, Su Hongyu was in Glass City. As the current head of the Su family, he was naturally the first person that the other family heads wanted to win over. Su Hongyu shook his head, indicating that he did not need to care. Su Qingshun was now the right chief minister, second only to one person. Su Qingbai was also a high official of the region. Su Qingze and Su Qingfeng also held important positions. The Su family was already in the limelight, and the older generation naturally did not need to be entangled in these matters. They only needed to pave the way for the younger generation. Su Qingshun raised his eyebrows and looked at Mo Xiaoyao, asking, Prince has left the position of left chief minister. Who is he planning to use at debate? Mo Xiaoyao raised his eyebrows and smiled. With a sincere expression, he said, I am not baiting anyone. The position of left chief minister has already been chosen. It is just that the person will not take the position. Mr. Xiaoding? Su Qingshun asked. Regardless of status, ability, or reputation, Mr. Xiaoding was no doubt a suitable candidate. The fact that he used to be from West Hill might be criticized, but it would undoubtedly make it easier for him to win over the hearts of the people of West Hill. After all, 1/3 of the Prince Ding Mansion's territory was seized from West Hill. Having a famous scholar from West Hill as the prime minister would have a great effect on the people's loyalty. Mr. Xiaoding agreed? Su Qingshun asked, but others don't know yet. Others might not know, but there would be many people eyeing the position of left prime minister covetously. Su Qingshun would never believe that Mo Xiaoyao did not intend to make a fuss about this. Mo Xiaoyao smiled and said, Of course I agree. However, Mr. Xiaoding is busy with the affairs in the Northwest. It will take at least 2 to 3 months before he can come to Glass City to take up his post. As for what happens during this period, it's none of I's business. Everyone present couldn't help but twitch their lips. Anyone who want to play tricks under Prince Ding's nose must have forgotten to burn incense in their previous life. Seeing everyone's expressions, Mo Xiaoyao didn't mind at all. He waved his hand and said, Let's not worry about these trivial matters for now. After this, they should be quiet for a few days. Let's talk about Lin, and Xian Er's first birthday banquet first. Everyone's expressions became serious. Su Qingze said calmly, The invitations have been sent out. The northern tribes, the Chu State, West Hill, Nanzhao, and the kingdoms of the western region have all been invited. The post house is also preparing for it. The envoys of the northern tribes are in Glass City now. As for the rest, He should be here in half a month. However, when the time comes, Glass City's safety. Su Qing's frowned. Although the world situation had been settled, it was because of this that it was more dangerous. Whether it was the northern tribes, West Hill, or the Chu State, there were many people who wanted Mo Xiaoyao's life in the dark. Mo Xiaoyao thought for a while and said, "When the time comes, I will deploy troops to guard the vicinity of Glass City. Also, Qingfeng's subordinate Qi Lin can also be stationed in Glass City temporarily in case of emergency." Yili nodded in agreement. Mo Xiaoyao asked curiously, "Who will come from West Hill?" Su Qingchun said leisurely, "If I'm not wrong, it should be Lei Tingfeng." Lei Tingfeng? Mo Xiaoyao frowned. He did not take Lei Tingfeng seriously. However, if Lei Tingfeng came personally, it meant that the situation in West Hill was still stable. Su Qingchun nodded and said, "I'm sorry to disappoint you. Lei Tingfeng and the Emperor of Xiling did not fight. Once the news of Lei Jinting's death spread, the Emperor of Xiling ordered Lei Tingfeng to succeed the position of Jinnum of Gojoseon. The Emperor of Xiling does not have a son. If everything goes well, Lei Tingfeng will be the next Emperor of West Hill." Whether it was the Emperor of Xiling or Lei Tingfeng, they were not as stupid as they thought. Therefore, their hopes of benefiting from the conflict would be dashed. Mo Xiaoyao did not mind. He waved his hand and smiled. "It's fine. If Lei Tingfeng is finished so quickly, I will be disappointed. Lei Jinting's death should allow him to grow. This time, I want to see how far he can grow." Su Qingchun nodded and said, "Lei Tingfeng should be here to negotiate with the Prince Ding mansion." Mo Xiaoyao lowered his eyebrows and thought for a while. He said, "Let Murong Shun and Marquis Nan continue to fight. If they don't fight to the original border between West Hill and the Chu State, there is no need to negotiate." Su Qingchun pondered for a moment and said, "If Lei Tingfeng wants to settle down and recuperate, he may take the initiative to retreat. That's the best." Mo Xiaoyao smiled and said, "No matter how he wants to negotiate, the Xiling army must retreat to the original border with the Chu State." Su Qingchun nodded and agreed with Mo Xiaoyao's point of view. He frowned and said, "The envoy of the northern tribes wants to talk to you, or Lear, personally." Mo Xiaoyao looked at Yili blankly and asked, "Who is the envoy of the northern tribes?" Master Qingchun was speechless. Mo Xiaoyao had been back for almost half a month. How could he not know who the envoy of the northern tribes was? Even if the northern tribes and the Mahist army had just fought a war, the envoy of the northern tribes was still a country's envoy. As Prince Ding, even if he wanted to pretend, he had to pretend to be a gentleman. Yelu Hong. Chapter 1054. In the end, Mo Xiaoyao did not summon the envoy from the northern tribes and threw the matter to Yili. It had to be said that Mo Xiaoyao was sometimes so headstrong that it gave people a headache. On this side, the elders of the prestigious families were discussing the matter of the princess consort interfering in politics. On the other side, he openly handed the matter of negotiating with the northern tribes over to the princess consort to handle. This was equivalent to slapping the faces of these old men who thought that they could interfere with Prince Ding's actions without any hesitation. However, the elders who had just been slapped mercilessly by Prince Ding did not dare to say anything before they came up with a countermeasure. They could only pretend that they did not see anything and hide in their homes to sulk. Greetings to Princess Ding. In the Northern Tribes Inn, Yelu Hong greeted Yili calmly. He was not angry because Mo Xiaoyao did not receive him personally. Not to mention Princess Ding's position in the Mahist army. Just the fact that the northern tribes were the defeated party meant that they did not have the right to raise any objections. Northern Tribes Crown Prince greets you. Yili could not help but sigh at Yelu Hong's good temperament. Even at this stage, he could still be so polite. Of course, at the same time, she also had to sigh at the influence of political power on people's hearts. Even the northern tribes people who were known to be the most upright and outspoken had learned to beat around the bush. Yili sat down and did not beat around the bush with Yelu Hong. She asked, "Did Princess Ronghua come with the crown prince?" Yelu Hong did not expect Yi Li's first question to be about Princess Ronghua. He paused for a moment before nodding. To be honest, Ronghua did come with me to Li City. Yi Li raised her eyebrows and smiled. The king of the northern tribes really trusts the crown prince. The king of the northern tribes used Princess Ronghua as a bargaining chip in the negotiations with the Mahist army. But before the negotiations could take place, he asked Yelu Hong to bring her back. It was hard to tell if the king of the northern tribes truly wanted to take back the ashes of Yelu Yi and the soldiers of the northern tribes, or if he was just joking. Yelu Hong smiled bitterly. This one has made a military order with father that I must bring back the remains of seventh brother and the northern tribe soldiers. Please grant my wish, princess consort. As for Ronghua, please take care of him. Yi Li took a deep look at Yelu Hong and said, the crown prince has deep feelings for Princess Ronghua. I have not let the princess down after all these years in the northern tribes. Yelu Hong sighed softly. This one is incompetent. This one has made a fool of himself in front of princess. I will ask Ronghua to come out and meet the princess. Yelu Hong turned around and ordered the attendant beside him. After a while, Princess Ronghua came out from the back hall. Princess Ronghua, who had changed into the clothes of the Central Plains, looked a little haggard and pale. Compared with the last time they met, she was less beautiful and more weak and haggard. Your Highness, Princess Ronghua bowed and said softly. Yi Li raised her hand to support her and said with a smile, Princess, you don't have to be so courteous. Please sit down. The three people sat down again. Yi Li looked at Yelu Hong and said, the prince has handed over the negotiations with the northern tribes to me. I presume that a few days ago, young Master Qin Shen has already mentioned the conditions of my princedom mansion to the crown prince. What does Crown Prince Yelu think? Yelu Hong frowned. The war horses are the foundation of the northern tribes. The princedom mansion wants 10,000 war horses at once. Forgive I for being blunt, but it is really difficult. With my power, I am afraid I can't agree. The negotiation was not something that could be done overnight. Yi Li did not care and said with a smile, Crown Prince Yelu does not need to rush to answer me. Anyway, the Crown Prince will stay in Li City for a while. It is better for the Crown Prince to think about it and discuss it with the king of the northern tribes. What does the Crown Prince think? Yelu Hong nodded and said with a smile, Thank you, Your Highness, for your understanding. Regardless of whether this matter is successful or not, Princess Ronghua will return to the Dechu state. Please take care of her. This is the sincerity of the northern tribes. Princess Ronghua's expression was indifferent. She lowered her eyes and sat quietly. It was as if Yelu Hong and Yi Li were not talking about her. Yi Li glanced at Princess Ronghua and sighed softly. If the princess stays in Li City, the princedom mansion will naturally treat you as a princess. If the princess misses her family, I can also send someone to send the princess to Jiangnan. With Princess Ronghua's status as a princess, no one would dare to treat her badly, whether she stayed in Li City or went to Nanjing. Princess Ronghua smiled faintly and said with a wry smile, Jiangnan, where is my family? Ronghua wants to go back to Chongqing to serve Aunt Zhaoyang. Please grant my wish, Your Highness. When the imperial court of the Chu state moved south, Princess Zhaoran also went south, but Zhaoyang princess stayed in the Chu capital. After that, the Mahist army took back the Chu capital and renamed it Chongqing. Great elder princess Fuxi died of illness, and Zhaoyang princess had been staying in Chongqing to observe mourning for great elder princess. Princess Zhaoran died of illness soon after going south. Now, Zhaoyang princess was the closest relative of Princess Ronghua. Yi Li nodded and said, Well, in a few days, Zhaoyang princess will also come to Li City. At that time, the princess can return to Chongqing with Zhaoyang princess. Princess Ronghua nodded gratefully and said, Thank you, Your Highness. After that, she lowered her head and no longer looked at Yelu Hong. Yelu Hong glanced at Princess Ronghua. His expression changed slightly, but he did not say anything. They had been husband and wife for 10 years. How could there be no feelings at all? What was more, Princess Ronghua was an extremely beautiful and intelligent woman, completely different from the ordinary women of the northern tribes. But no matter what, Princess Ronghua was definitely not as important as the throne of the northern tribes. After today's departure, they might never see each other again. When Yili left the northern tribes' embassy, she brought Princess Ronghua back. Since Yelu Hong had already brought Princess Ronghua to Li City, no matter whether the negotiation was successful or not, he naturally did not think that he could bring her back. In this case, it did not matter when Princess Ronghua would be returned to the Prince Ding mansion. He simply generously let Yili take her away directly. After returning to the Prince Ding mansion and settling Princess Ronghua down, Yili looked at Princess Ronghua's gloomy look and just sighed secretly. She did not try to comfort her. In the future, regardless of the relationship between the Prince Ding mansion and the Dechu state and the northern tribes, Princess Ronghua was destined not to return to the northern tribes. Princess Ronghua was also a smart person. Naturally, she understood that the current situation was very good for her. Yelu Hong treated her with some affection. At this moment, she was probably still worried about her children in the northern tribes. But whether it was the Prince Ding mansion or the Dechu state far away in Jiangnan, they could not and had no obligation to bring back the children for her. Today, the people of the Central Plains hated the northern tribes more than the northern tribes hated the people of the Central Plains. Even if the children really returned to the Dechu state, it would not be a good thing. After a few days of negotiation with Yelu Hong, who had insisted on not giving in, finally relented and agreed to exchange 10,000 northern tribes' warhorses for the remains of Yelu Yi and the soldiers who died in the Dechu state. For this result, Yili was not surprised. This time, the northern tribes were defeated by the Mahist army. It could be said that the national strength of the northern tribes was greatly reduced. The northern tribes were sparsely populated and barren. If they wanted to return to their heyday, it would take at least a decade or two. And this was assuming that the Mahist army would not take the initiative to attack and give them a chance to rest. 10,000 warhorses in exchange for a temporary peace and a chance to breathe. It may not be a good thing for the northern tribes in the long run, but now the northern tribes had no other choice. Chapter 1055. When the two sides signed the peace agreement, Immo Xiaoyao finally showed up personally. However, Yi Li and Su Qingquan's names were still signed on the document. Su Qingquan was now the right prime minister and naturally had the right to represent Prince Ding in signing the agreement. However, Yi Li's appearance as a woman made the northern tribes' emissaries feel uneasy. It wasn't that they looked down on Yi Li, but they also understood the rules and traditions of the Central Plains. In formal situations, women had no right to speak. Thus, they couldn't help but doubt the effectiveness of this peace agreement. Faced with the northern tribes' suspicions and the dissatisfied gazes of the aristocratic officials, Yi Li didn't care and simply signed her name on the agreement. After both sides signed the agreement, Immo Xiaoyao stood up and pulled Yi Li to Yelu Hong with a smile. "Crown Prince Yelu, since you and I have signed the agreement, I hope to see the 10,000 northern tribes' horses as soon as possible." Hearing this, Yelu Hong's mouth twitched. It was said that people of the Central Plains like to beat around the bush and make others dizzy. However, Yelu Hong found that being too direct was also unbearable. Immo Xiaoyao's words meant to Yelu Hong, "If it wasn't for the 10,000 horses, why would I be in the mood to sign a peace agreement with you? Prince Ding, don't worry. As long as the Mahist army abides by the agreement, within 3 months, the 10,000 horses will be sent to the Central Plains." Yelu Hong said. Immo Xiaoyao raised his eyebrows. "I will naturally keep my word. 10,000 horses. Within 10 years, neither side will be able to start a war." Yelu Hong nodded. In the future, the northern tribes and the Prince Ding mansion will be allies. This crown prince will toast the prince and princess. Immo Xiaoyao's expression was indifferent, and he didn't object. That was how it was between countries. There were no eternal friends or eternal enemies. There were only eternal benefits. Although it was said that both sides were on good terms, both sides knew that neither the northern tribes nor the Prince Ding mansion had the strength to fight another battle. However, the northern tribes was in a worse state than the Prince Ding mansion. If the Prince Ding mansion tried their best, they could still fight another round. However, the losses would outweigh the gains. If the northern tribes were to continue fighting, it would be a disaster. Therefore, the northern tribes had to pay a higher price. If one day one of the two sides recovered and wanted to make a move, the so-called peace agreement would be nothing more than a piece of paper. When the envoys from Xiling and Dechu State arrived at Glass City, the Prince Ding mansion had just signed the agreement with the northern tribes. Upon hearing this news, the expressions of the envoys from the two countries turned ugly. With the ceasefire between the Prince Ding mansion and the northern tribes, it was very likely that they would turn their attention to the south. Regardless of whether it was the Dechu State or Xiling, they would not be able to withstand the attacks of the Mahist army. Everyone had to face an ironclad fact. After so many years of open and covert struggles, the final victor was obviously Prince Ding's residence. Reporting to the prince's consort, the envoys from Dechu State and Xiling have come to visit. When they heard this news, Mo Xiaoyao and Yili were sitting in the courtyard, playing with the two babies. The two babies had been handed over to the Su family not long after they were born. Yili had always felt guilty about this. Ever since they returned, whenever they had time, Yili would drag Mo Xiaoyao to accompany the two babies. From time to time, Mo Xiaobao would also come to join the fun. Mo Xiaoyao was very fond of the little princess who was already as exquisite as a snow jade, so he followed Yili to play with the two babies every day. The two of them had become the most leisurely people in the bustling Glass City. Why did they come together? Yili raised her eyebrows and asked. Mo Xiaoyao did not mind and said indifferently, "The distance between the two sides is about the same. It's not a big deal to arrive together." Who came from Jiangnan? The guard reported. Reporting to the prince, "It's King Yu from Dechu State who came with the new Emperor Chu." King Yu? Mo Jingyu? Mo Xiaoyao did not have much of an impression of these princes from the Dechu State's royal family. When he was young, he might have been familiar with them, but when he grew up, especially after the incident at the Prince Ding mansion, he did not have much interaction with these people. Therefore, he did not have a deep impression of this Mo Jingyu, who could be considered to have made a name for himself. Yili got up and placed Lin who had already fallen asleep in her hands, back onto the small bed. She said, "Since Xiling Jinim of Gojoseon and Emperor Chu have personally come, we should go out and meet them, so as to avoid being rude." Mo Xiaoyao nodded. He carefully put down the little princess and followed Yili out to meet the guests. In the main hall of the Prince Ding mansion, the two groups of people were divided into two sides. The new little emperor of Dechu State, Mo Suiyun, was only 12 years old this year. He sat at the forefront of the Dechu State side. Although he was wearing the luxurious dragon robe of the Ming Emperor, his expression showed that he was somewhat weak and panicked. From time to time, he would look at Mo Jingyu, who was sitting below him. On the other side, Lei Tongfeng was wearing the Xiling Jinim of Gojoseon's court robes. He looked dignified and graceful. Compared to his previous irritation and panic, he was more composed and calm. Chapter 1056. Mo Xiaoyao smiled, but didn't say anything. With his intelligence, how could he not know what the Dechu State was planning? It could only be said that those old men in Nanjing were the same as those in Glass City. They were all as naive. Seeing Mo Jingyu's awkwardness, Yili smiled and said, "Emperor Chu and Jinim of Gojoseon have come from afar. It must have been a tiring journey. This consort has ordered people to prepare a guest house. I invite the two of you to rest there. This consort and the prince will hold a welcoming dinner for the two of you tonight." Lei Tingfeng nodded silently. "Thank you, princess." Although Lei Tingfeng had calmed down a lot these days, it was still difficult for him to face the enemy who had killed his father. Looking at the leisurely Mo Xiaoyao and Yili in front of him, Lei Tingfeng suddenly felt a little weak. He didn't have the mood to say anything else. Mo Jingyu glanced at the clearly tired Mo Suiyun and nodded. If that's the case, then thank you, Princess. King Yu is too courteous. Yili smiled faintly. Soon, Lei Tingfeng, Mo Jingyu, and the others bid farewell and left. It was their first time in Glass City, so they had come to pay their respects. Even if there was something, they would have to wait until they had rested. Seeing the group leave, Yili sighed softly. Lei Tingfeng has changed a lot. No wonder he was able to control Shi Ling in such a short time. If a few more years pass, he will be a good opponent. Lei Tingfeng had been suppressed by Lei Jinting's brilliance for too long, so much so that he had lost his edge. Without Lei Jinting, this insurmountable mountain, Lei Tingfeng's growth and changes could be said to be rapid. Mo Xiaoyao raised his eyebrows. Even if he is an opponent, he won't be Ai's opponent. Lei Tingfeng still needed a long time to truly grow. At that time, his opponent naturally wouldn't be him. Prince Ding calculated with satisfaction. He didn't feel the slightest bit of guilt for setting up a powerful opponent for his son. Yili looked at him helplessly and smiled faintly. What does the Chu state mean? With one arm around Yili, Mo Xiaoyao lazily said, what else could it mean? Those old fellows in Nanjing's imagination. See, was there going to be another cycle of the Dechu state and the Mahist army entangling each other again? Yili stared blankly. She couldn't help but smile and shake her head. It had to be said that these old men in the imperial court who had monopolized power for their entire lives sometimes had complicated thoughts that made one dizzy, but sometimes they were so naive that it made one want to laugh. How could they think that after the Mahist army and the Dechu state had broken off relations, and after the Mahist army had paid such a heavy price, the Prince Ding Mansion and the Dechu state would still have a day of reconciliation? The people of the Prince Ding Mansion weren't benevolent bodhisattvas. This shouldn't be Mo Jingyu's intention. Yili said, although Mo Jingyu was respectful to Mo Xiaoyao, he wasn't very friendly. It was clear that he didn't think highly of these people's plans. Mo Xiaoyao smiled. For Mo Jingyu to be able to live until now and have so much power, he naturally isn't an idiot. It's impossible that he doesn't know this. It's just that, right now, I'm afraid that he's unable to completely control the entire imperial court of the Dechu state. Mo Jingli was a little stupid, but Jiangnan was his territory. And compared to Mo Jingli, it was clear that Mo Jingli's methods were more ruthless. When Mo Jingli was around, these old men didn't dare to cause trouble. Now that the new emperor had been installed, it would be strange if they didn't take advantage of their seniority. What do you plan to do? Yili asked with a smile. Mo Xiaoyao said, I've already defeated Mo Jingli and Mo Jingqi. Mo Suiyun is Mo Xiaobao's problem. Otherwise, others might think that I've gone against the imperial family of the Dechu state. They even bullied a teenage child. Later, I'll tell Mo Xiaobao to take a look at Mo Suiyun, lest that brat has nothing better to do and keeps circling around Exum. You're saying? Mo Suiyun. Yili frowned, looking at Mo Xiaoyao in confusion. If Mo Suiyun wasn't worth mentioning, Mo Xiaoyao wouldn't have specially asked Mo Xiaobao to visit him. Mo Xiaoyao chuckled softly. I think that brat might be a smart person. At least, he's smarter than his father and uncle. Yili sighed helplessly. She wasn't born in the imperial family after all. She wasn't worried about the dangers in the open, but she wasn't good at these things in the dark. At least, she didn't see anything strange about Mo Suiyun from their conversation just now. Mo Xiaoyao happily rubbed Yi Li's fragrant hair and smiled. That brat's acting skills aren't bad. If I hadn't met his gaze just now, I would have been fooled by him. When he looked at Ai, he didn't show as much fear as he did. But he's still a child after all. He probably didn't have anyone to teach him since he was young, so he still gave himself away. Yili nodded. It wasn't easy to not give herself away in front of Mo Xiaoyao. That child was probably purposely showing a fearful expression, but he didn't know that going too far was as bad as not going far enough. Mo Xiaobao. If Mo Xiaobao can't even win against him, Then he should be taught a lesson by Su Qingchen, Mo Xiaoyao said indifferently. A Prince Ding Mansion's heir who had been carefully taught since young couldn't even win against the little emperor who had just been pushed onto the throne. If this was spread out, as his father, he would feel ashamed for him. Yili looked up and saw the dissatisfaction that flashed across Mo Xiaoyao's face. She could only nod and agree. Understand. I'll let Xiaobao receive Emperor Chu later. But if Mo Xiaobao's performance wasn't good and he was taught a lesson by his father, as his mother, she could only feel sorry for him. Mo Xiaoyao never lacked new ways to teach people a lesson. He didn't hold back when it came to teaching Mo Xiaobao a lesson. So, classmate Mo Xiaobao had to be careful. In the Prince Ding Mansion's backyard, Mo Xiaobao, who had just finished his homework and ran back to his room to visit his sister, suddenly shivered. Chapter 1057. The Prince Ding Mansion arranged for the Dechu State's post house to be located just 2 streets away from the Prince Ding Mansion. For example, Xiling, Northern Army, Southern Army, etc., all had their own embassies in Glass City. However, the Dechu State never had one. Firstly, it was because the relationship between the Dechu State and the Prince Ding Mansion was awkward. Secondly, neither Mo Jingli nor Mo Jingqi were willing to admit that the Prince Ding Mansion was an independent power. Therefore, every time the Dechu State sent an envoy, it was always arranged by the Prince Ding Mansion. However, this time, Mo Jingyu took the initiative to tell Mo Xiaoyao that the Dechu State intended to set up an embassy in Glass City. His intention to show weakness was obvious. In the post house, Mo Suiyun shook off Mo Jingyu and the group of officials and walked into his room. His face, which was originally filled with a trace of cowardice and immaturity, immediately darkened. He walked to the side of the table and sat down, lost in thought. Before ascending the throne, Mo Suiyun never thought that he would one day become the ruler of a country. Just like his royal brother, Mo Suiyun, who had passed away, his mother was just an unremarkable palace maid. Compared to Mo Suiyun, he was even more obviously ignored. Even his name was given by his mother. Or perhaps he was even luckier than Mo Suiyun because he was not chosen by Mo Jingqi to inherit the throne at that time. All these years, as the emperor, Mo Suiyun had been living in the palace. He could clearly see with his cold eyes what kind of life Mo Suiyun was living. Originally, he thought that he would be an unremarkable prince and move out of the palace to live his life peacefully after he grew up. However, he never thought that one day, Mo Jingli, who was out on a campaign, would suddenly be deposed. Then, the Empress Dowager and all the royal relatives, civil and military officials found that he was the most suitable candidate. Following that, he became the Dechu State's emperor. Mo Jingli being deposed made him sigh in relief. Although he had only seen Mo Jingli a few times, every time he saw this Uncle Wang, he would feel a chill down his spine. He could clearly feel that Mo Jingli wanted to kill him. No, it should be said that Mo Jingli wanted to kill all the princes left behind by the previous emperor. And he didn't seem to be dead. It was only when he ascended to the throne that he realized the true suffering of his younger brother. In the eyes of the Empress Dowager and the nobles, this little emperor was just a chess piece in their game. Mo Suiyun knew that he didn't want that. He didn't want to be tied down by these people. He had heard a lot about Prince Ding, and he wanted to be like him. Therefore, his respect towards Prince Ding was not fake. He really respected and admired this world-shaking prince. So when he bowed to him, he couldn't help but look up at Prince Ding. However, when he met the deep and indifferent eyes of the white-clothed, white-haired handsome man, he couldn't help but feel a little flustered. Those indifferent eyes didn't seem to see him at all, but also seemed to be able to see through the most secretive thoughts in his heart. He quickly pretended to be afraid and lowered his head, but he knew that he had definitely aroused Prince Ding's suspicion. Mo Suiyun bit the corner of his lips and frowned. Although he was quite scheming and courageous, he was still an 11 or 12-year-old child after all. Moreover, no one had taught him seriously all these years, so when he encountered such an unexpected situation, he couldn't help but panic. If Prince Ding wanted to kill him, reporting to your majesty, there's a young master outside requesting an audience. Outside the door, the guard reported in a low voice. Mo Sui-yun was feeling vexed, so he frowned unhappily and said, "What young master? I won't see him." But the guard hesitated. Mo Sui-yun said impatiently, "If there's anything, go find Uncle Yu. Don't bother me." Soon, there was no sound outside the door. Mo Sui-yun sneered in his heart. These people didn't even put him, the emperor, in their eyes. It was just a routine report. Although he was a little curious as to why someone would look for him in Glass City, Mo Sui-yun wasn't in the mood to think about it. Thud, thud, thud. Just as Mo Sui-yun was about to speak, a light knocking sound came from the window. Mo Sui-yun frowned. Just as he stood up, he saw the window being opened from the outside, and a handsome man poked his head in from the window. Mo Sui-yun frowned slightly and stared at the boy for a while before asking, "You were looking for me just now?" The boy pursed his lips and climbed up from the window. He gently landed on the ground and nodded. "That's right. Why didn't you see me?" Mo Sui-yun couldn't help but roll his eyes. "Do I know you?" After sizing him up again, he realized that the boy was extremely handsome and seemed to be younger than him. He was wearing very ordinary clothes, but it couldn't hide the noble aura he seemed to have been born with. Mo Sui-yun silently calculated in his heart before asking, "You are Mo Yu-chen?" Mo Xiaobao rolled his eyes and grinned as he came to Mo Sui-yun's side to size him up. He smiled and said, "You are indeed very smart. How did you guess my identity?" Mo Sui-yun resisted the urge to roll his eyes. In the entire Glass City, other than the little heir of the Prince Ding mansion, how many people dared to barge into the post house where the Emperor of the Chu State was staying? "What brings the little heir here?" Mo Sui-yun assumed the posture of an emperor and asked solemnly. Mo Xiaobao blinked his eyes and looked at Mo Sui-yun strangely. "What brings me here? Look at me. What brings me here?" He was only 10 years old, okay? Even if he wanted to do something, he had to wait until he had power. Right now, he was only a pitiful child who was brought out by his annoying Lord Father to meet his future enemy. Mo Sui-yun silently looked at Mo Xiaobao, who didn't regard himself as an outsider at all. He sat down and picked up the fruit on the table to wipe it before starting to eat. He only felt a dull pain in his forehead. His intuition from living in the palace for a long time told him that this boy with a pure smile in front of him was very troublesome. Mo Xiaobao looked at Mo Sui-yun, who was standing silently at the side, and waved his hand. "Come and sit." Mo Sui-yun walked to the opposite side of Mo Xiaobao and sat down. Looking at him eating happily, he secretly wondered if Prince Ding never allowed the heir to eat his fill. "What brings you here?" Mo Xiaobao smiled brightly at him and said, "To come and play with you. Lord Father said that I am the host and should take good care of the guests. I was afraid that you would be lonely, so I came to find you to play." "Play?" Mo Sui-yun was a little confused. It wasn't that Mo Sui-yun didn't know what was good for him as a guest, but he really couldn't understand when he had such a good relationship with the little heir of the Prince Ding mansion that they could go and play together. Mo Xiaobao raised his chin and looked at him proudly. "How is it? Are you going or not?" Meeting Mo Xiaobao's provocative gaze, Mo Sui-yun suddenly gritted his teeth and nodded heavily. "I'll go. I'm also an emperor. Why would I be afraid of you? A heir. So, little emperor, you're certain that Mo Xiaobao won't dare to kill you. So you're going out to play with him?" You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.